Happy Sunday, everybody. Welcome to the Sunday Show. I'm Matt Dillahunty. Joining me this week, Darante, Lamar. How are you, my friend?
I am doing wonderful. Glad to be back here. It's been a beautiful day, man, in spite living in Alabama.
Yeah. Actually, somebody asked me the other day, they're like, "Oh, are you still looking to get out of Texas?" I'm like, hell yeah, I'm looking to get out of Texas. We're considering all kinds of stuff. I actually donated to someone's campaign for Congress in a state where I don't even live. I liked their videos so much this morning. I saw it. But I'll get into that probably later on. Look, this is a call-in show, and it's everybody's opportunity to call in and explain what you believe and why, and more importantly, why you think others should believe it as well. In particular, we deal with religious claims, supernatural claims, God claims. And so if you're convinced there's a God, what we'd like you to do is tell us, what do you know about this God? What are this God's features? How would you describe this God? You know, is this some ambiguous higher power? I don't even know what the heck that means. Is this specifically the God of the Bible, the God of the Quran, the God of the, Bhagavad Gita's, or whatever else you're going to be doing? And then present the reason that you think other people should believe. If you're calling in to just say, hey, I think there's something, or I think there's probably something based on my personal experience, and I don't think that should convince anybody else, just kind of save it. Because, I mean, if you don't present something that we can evaluate, something that is remotely testable, falsifiable, something that we could detect, something we could even understand, I don't know how to have that conversation. We can have a secondary conversation about why do you believe something that you can't explain or describe, or along those lines. But we already have theist callers line up, so let's get started.
Yes.
First caller today for Sunday is Stevie, no preferred pronouns. He's a theist from Texas and says he's happy to present, or they or she is happy to present evidence for the God of the Bible. So Stevie, you're on with Darante and Matt. How are you?
Hi, Stevie.
Hello.
Is it me you're looking for?
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh, I can
Now
hear you
we
now.
can.
Hello? Oh, there we go. How are you guys doing? Matt, Darante, how are y'all?
We're all
Doing pretty
right.
good,
What's up?
man. Good to hear. So yeah, just want to start out, just tell you a tiny bit about me. So I was raised Catholic, and kind of turned into an atheist after that, actually. And then after kind of going through some personal things, I did a bunch of research and looked at a bunch of evidence, and the evidence actually convinced me to become a Christian. That's kind of my story. I'm a young Earth creationist as well.
Wow.
And I am aware of your story, Matt, but I'm not aware of Darante. Darante, are you able to just briefly tell me a little bit about you so I can understand your perspective? Is that fair?
Oh, certainly. I was active in the ministry for about almost 2 decades. I got saved at about 11 years old, gave my life to the Lord, and immediately got active in ministry and was active. Ended up pastoring about 2 churches during that time frame. Was very, very much involved in the mega church movement, and then eventually deconstructed because I ultimately realized there was no evidence or justification in my faith. And even beyond that, realized that these beliefs were absolutely harmful and dangerous and impacting critical thinking. But I appreciate you for asking. I do have a quick question for you, if you don't mind. You mentioned that you went from
Fire away.
Catholic to, thank you. You mentioned that you went from Catholic to atheist, and then you did some studying and you came back to Christian. What convinced you to be an atheist?
Well, like you, or I should say more like Matt, my family they took me to church. I went to, the, what do you call it? The communion, and I did all the confirmation, all that good stuff. And it just never sat with me. It never made sense to me. Nobody could ever answer any of my questions.
That's nothing like my story. But
am a deeply, okay, well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I'm just, this is my story, I guess. So anyways, I'm a very theological person. I ask a lot of questions. I couldn't get any questions answered at the Catholic Church. And I just kind of felt for many years, I would want to say at least 10 to 15 years, that there really was no God, I think. And that's kind of what happened with me with the Catholic Church.
Okay. Interesting.
All
right.
Yeah.
So did you finally get the answers? Did you finally get the answers elsewhere that the Catholic Church wouldn't give you? Is that what happened?
Yeah, I did actually.
Cool. So what's like
all
one
my
of the
questions answered.
questions? What's like one of the questions, and what was the answer you got?
Yeah, good question. So yeah, I mean, one of the questions, let me see here, and there are so many of them. Probably honestly, the one that kind of hit me the most was like, how did we all get here? So like just the universe as it is, and so I just kind of dug into that, and
you got an answer?
Just
well, and just to clarify real quick, you mentioned two things. You said, how did we get here? And then you said the universe. So which one, if we can hone in on which one specifically, are you saying that you got an answer for how the universe got here, or the answer for how humans got here, got on Earth?
Well, that's what I mean by there were so many questions. So I mean both, but probably like the universe is probably the one that I went to first, maybe.
Okay.
Like I said, awesome. I went through a whole thing. So if you like, we could start with that, or morals was also another big one.
Well, if you think you know how the universe got here, if you think you know how the universe got here, and if you think you know how the universe got here, and that the answer is the Christian God, I would love for you to demonstrate that.
Yes.
Yeah, and just to lay the groundwork, I'm talking about evidence, so I'm not sitting here saying that I know for a fact, but I am saying that if you follow the evidence, I do believe the evidence supports that. So
I'm just trying to find out what the evidence is.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, you agree, Matt, I imagine everything that has a beginning had to have a cause, right?
No.
Can you name one thing that had a beginning that didn't have a cause?
No. Can you?
No, that's what I'm saying. In our observation, there's not a single thing that had a beginning that didn't have a cause for it.
Are you familiar with the no black? Are you familiar with the black swan fallacy?
No, go ahead and fill me in on that if you don't mind.
Sure. The black swan fallacy would be if all the swans you've seen are white, concluding that there's not a black swan somewhere based on only seeing white swans. That would be fallacious. You can't reach that conclusion. So the fact that you and I can't point to something that had a beginning and didn't have a cause doesn't mean that there isn't something, right?
Well, I mean, you have God, of course. God didn't have a cause, so that's
God didn't have a beginning. It's amazing that you're getting this so, the whole point of your line of argument that you were trying to present is that God's excluded from having a cause because God doesn't have a beginning, right?
That's correct. Yep.
Correct. So what I asked, though, was just because you and I cannot point to something and say that thing had a beginning and did not have a cause, that doesn't mean that we can conclude that it's impossible for something to begin without a cause, correct?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that.
Okay. You began with, Matt, would you agree that everything that has a beginning has a cause? And I said no, and you wanted me to somehow demonstrate that there was something that had a beginning that didn't have a cause. But that's neither something that I claim to be able to do, nor is it my job. If you are claiming that nothing that begins, or that everything that begins has a cause, you need to demonstrate that. And you can't do that by simply saying, well, we haven't seen anything. We can't identify anything that had a beginning, but not a cause. So already your beginning thing here is fallacious. So what have you got that is evidence
Yes,
for?
I agree with that.
What have you got that is evidence for the God that you believe in existing? And evidence for, by the way, is not just facts that are consistent with a proposition, but facts and information that strongly indicate one proposition over all other possible candidates. I don't even know, when you say you figured out how the universe came to be, and then you start with something can't, everything that begins has a cause. And then we shoot down that first premise right off the bat. What is your case that you have figured out how the universe came to be?
Well, what I was trying to say was that if we look at the universe, if we look at, the fact that it's expanding, we can see logically that it likely had a beginning. And if we look at the universe as we know it and look at the evidence that we can see and observe, there is no evidence that something that has a beginning.
I'm sorry,
does
Stevie,
not have a
but
cause.
all you've
We've
done,
never observed that.
Stevie, I'm sorry, but all you've done is restate exactly what you said before and committed the exact same fallacy, which is saying we've never observed something having a beginning without a cause, which is irrelevant to whether or not everything that has a beginning has a cause. So if you're just going to keep restating the same fallacious argument, we're not going to get anywhere, because I'm not going to accept fallacies. And fallacies, by the way, aren't evidence.
No, I mean, that's fine.
And arguments aren't evidence. You're making a claim. The claim is you have discovered the explanation for the origin of the universe. And when I ask you what the evidence is to support your claim, you're like, well, we've never seen something with a beginning not have a cause, and the universe clearly had a beginning. Well, we don't know that the universe had a beginning. We do know that it's in its present form after the expansion that we describe with Big Bang cosmology. After that expansion, we know the state of the universe. But prior to the Planck length time, the Planck time is the furthest back that we can discretely even evaluate the universe mathematically. We can say nothing about that. We can say nothing about what existed or not. But what's funny is you say, not only if we look at the universe, we can see that it probably had a beginning and therefore it had a cause, and that cause is probably God, but you're also a young Earth creationist, which means you're denying the very science of Big Bang cosmology and all of the information that shows the age of the Earth. So you have not only accepted that you found the correct explanation of the universe, but that it conflicts with everything the best experts and best data from science show. So you've got a big hurdle to overcome, and you're not going to do it with, well, we've never seen something begin without a cause.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make good points, Matt. I just want us to, I guess we could both agree that there is no evidence of that, and so we can just go ahead and move on. And I also want to clarify.
No, Stevie.
That, I didn't say.
Stevie, why would we move on if you're admitting there's no evidence for the thing you proposed?
I mean, I consider it evidence. You're disagreeing with that.
Oh, no.
You can. That's your opinion.
You just said that we could agree that there isn't evidence, and you have presented nothing but a fallacy. What piece of evidence did you present?
No, I said that we could agree that. Let me think about what we were saying. I said that we can agree, and I didn't want to restate it for you because you seem like you didn't want me to restate it. So, I mean, we can agree that because we don't see it, that there's no evidence I meant no evidence for the fact that anything that has a beginning doesn't have a cause. We've never seen that. We've never seen evidence. I didn't want to restate it because
that's
I didn't want you to
irrelevant.
get upset with me.
That's irrelevant.
That's the evidence I said.
That is irrelevant. I'm sorry that you don't understand logical fallacies, and I'm sorry that the Catholic Church failed you, but so did your investigations, because not only have you gone from atheist without, I mean, you are not using skepticism. You are not using critical thinking. You are not understanding logical fallacies,
That's an
and you don't
assumption, but
understand
yeah.
the nature of evidence, and yet you're calling in to say that you have found the right answer to the origin of the universe, and that right answer is the Christian God, and then you have no evidence to back it up. What do you have some evidence to back this up?
Yeah, sure. I mean, you mentioned that I went against science as a young Earth creationist. We can talk about that if you want.
Well, why? I'm asking you, even if whether or not the universe is old or young, whether or not the earth is old or young, is irrelevant to whether or not you have evidence for what you've claimed. This is, I mean, this is bizarre to me. Darante and I are sitting here saying, we now know what you believe. You are a Christian of some variety. There's, thousands of denominations of Christianity, but you're a Christian of some variety. And you are a young earth creationist. And when you say that you're going to present evidence for the biblical God, and we ask you for it, all you did was start with a flawed presentation of the Kalam cosmological argument, which, by the way, the Kalam cosmological argument is everything that begins to exist has a cause for its existence. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause for its existence. That is the entirety of the Kalam. It does not conclude, therefore God is the cause. That is something that gets added to the cause. And the first premise, everything that begins to exist has a cause, has not been demonstrated. It has been asserted. And what you and all the other apologists try to do is shift the burden of proof to say, we're just going to say that's true until such time as you show us something that began without a cause. And the second premise is that the universe began to exist, which also hasn't been demonstrated to be true. All we can say is that the universe expanded. What it was prior, or what interacted upon it, or where it came from, if it came from anything at all, are all open questions that we not only have not been able to come up with an answer with, but we seem to be permanently barred from coming up with an answer because we cannot investigate prior to
Yes,
the
sir.
Planck time the expansion of the universe. So what else have you got that could
So what's
count
your
as what?
so just yeah?
Go ahead, ask the question because this is going to be
I was just going
cartoonish.
to ask a clarifying question. So
Yeah.
So you're saying that we can't prove that the universe had a beginning. All we know is that it began to expand. Is that right?
I'm saying I don't know what we can prove, but it seems that for the current time we are barred from investigating things at scopes beyond the Planck time. So we can mathematically trace back to just the tiniest fraction of a second after the expansion began, but we don't have any way to model anything prior to that or investigate it. Whether or not we come up with a different way to investigate, whether or not we discover something else, that I can't say because I can't predict the future.
But you acknowledge that the expansion had a beginning. So it really doesn't matter because you're still saying there was a beginning to the expansion.
Wow,
So
this is a convenient little
you've
twist where
given
you
that up.
ignore.
So
This is a convenient little twist where you ignore that everything you've said has been fallacious. Nothing you've said
Mhm.
counts as evidence, and yet you're still trying to find a way to make it fit. Instead of following the evidence where it leads,
no, I'm just
you are not. No, stop interrupting me. Instead of following the evidence where it leads, you are trying to make your current understanding and your current flawed argument, you're trying to rehabilitate it because you already have a
Yep.
conclusion in mind, which is how you are not only being anti-reasonable and anti-scientific, but that's what leads you to be young earth creationist. Because when you don't know how anything works, you'll believe anything.
well, that's
Tracks.
assumption. That's definitely an assumption, but it's the wrong one. But anyways, it
Observation.
doesn't really matter.
What assumption?
Yeah, I
What
mean that's
assumption
fine.
did I,
You can have that on.
what you just accused me of making an assumption.
You're assuming I haven't. Yeah, you're making an assumption about me. You don't know
No, I'm
how
not.
much research I've done. You don't know what I've looked at. We've talked to one. We've talked.
This is your
talked on
opportunity
one
to
point.
demonstrate your
You're
research. He's making an observation based off what you just demonstrated. That's not an assumption. That's an observation.
When you walk in,
That's literally what
and
you're here to do.
when you walk in to say, I'm going to present evidence for the Christian God, evidence for the God of the Bible, and you present no evidence, and you present a logically flawed argument, and then when it's pointed out, you agree, and then restate the same logically flawed argument again with the exact same flaw again, and you say that you're a young earth creationist, while flatly denying the findings of science, then no, it's not an assumption on my part that you're anti-science. You have demonstrated this. And it's not an assumption on my part that you're anti-reasonable, because you demonstrated this. You don't understand science or logic. And so now all we're trying to do is figure out what evidence do you have, since you presented nothing, that the God of the Bible is real.
Yeah, so I disagree with how you mischaracterized it. But
Okay, Stevie,
like
Stevie, I don't give a shit whether you agree with how I characterize it. This is a fact. It's on a recording. It's not an assumption. I am assessing you after you opened your mouth and spewed forth fallacies, logical fallacies, identifiable logical fallacies. I'm sorry that you don't understand that a logical fallacy doesn't mean you're wrong. It means you cannot show that you're right. If an argument is logically fallacious, it means the conclusion's truth value cannot be determined. So if you've determined, based on your flawed argument, that the conclusion is true, you are anti-reasonable. You are in opposition to reason. This is not up for debate. It's not a matter of opinion. We can take this call and submit it to 100 professors who teach principles of logical argument, and you would get an F, and all of them would identify the fallacies. This is not an assumption on my part. So what evidence do you have for God?
Okay, well, when it comes to the beginning argument, that was the only argument I had for the beginning. So if you won't accept that, then we can move on to the next topic.
Stevie,
and I see what you're saying.
Stevie, for clarity, you're saying that you were a Catholic, then you became an atheist, and then you wanted answers to why are we here or how do we get here? And then you accepted a flawed argument that has nothing to do with Christianity, and that made you a Christian? And that's the only evidence you have, is your one flawed argument that does not mention Christianity at all?
That's not the only evidence I have. That's just the one that we started with.
No. I've asked you repeatedly to present the evidence that you have, and you literally just said a moment ago that argument was all you had.
No, I said that's the only one pertaining to the universe.
I didn't ask you.
Well,
Stevie,
Stevie,
is English your first language?
It is.
Cool. Because I don't want to think that I'm picking on someone who clearly can't communicate well in English. I mean, you avoided pronouns for no reason. But we're sitting here saying, and I'm asking you what evidence you have for God, and you went with that argument from the beginning was all you had. And now you're saying you had more. It just doesn't have to do with the beginning. Present some evidence for God. Mm-hmm. That's it.
Objective morals. That's evidence for God.
The problem here, Stevie, is the problem here, Stevie, is that I don't accept that the foundation of morality is in fact objective.
So you're okay with saying that, raping a child is fine?
No. And I find it absolutely no. You're done speaking right now. I'm muting you again. I find it embarrassingly sad for you that also, in addition to not understanding logic or science, you don't understand the philosophy related to morals, and you don't understand the basics of assertions. When I say I'm not convinced that the foundation of morality is objective, that is not a declaration that it must necessarily be subjective. It is not in any way a statement about moral relativism, and it has nothing to do with how I go about evaluating individual moral positions. But you, like so many other dishonest, weak-minded individuals, decided to suggest, oh, if Matt doesn't think there's objective morals, he's okay with SA on a child. No, because I'm not fucking Catholic, going to be hiding that stuff. My moral foundation, and it's not just Catholics, but, fuck the Catholic Church. My moral foundation is the well-being of the well-being of thinking minds, human beings. Once we have that foundation, which there's no objective requirement that should be the foundation, but once we have that foundation, there are objective assessments that can be made comparing the consequences of actions with the impact those things have with the standard. And so, no, for me, morality is that which impacts the well-being of us. And sexual assault is in conflict with the well-being of us. It is embarrassingly bad that rather than trying to have an honest discussion about this, you decide to go to a sensationalist thing where you're talking about sexually assaulting children because you think that's going to earn you points because you only understand morals from an internal perspective of what you feel is wrong, and you don't know how or why because you haven't bothered to look into any of this. And yes, that's also not an assumption, because people who would have looked into this wouldn't have said bullshit you just said. So let me try this, Stevie. When it comes to morality,
So
is there a Satan?
Go ahead.
Is there a Satan?
Yes, Satan exists.
Cool. Is Satan the bad one?
We're all bad, but he's certainly one of them. Yeah.
Is God the good one?
Yes, that is good.
How did you determine that God is the good one and Satan is the bad one?
Oh,
That is the good is the characteristic of God. That God is good. That's His standard. The standard is God.
How do you know that?
I know that from the Bible, the teachings of the Bible.
How do you know the Bible's true?
Because the Bible is probably the most accurate historical document of ancient history.
Okay, Stevie, you're not a real caller. Thanks for calling and wasting our time. Goodbye.
yikes.
There's not a single person who's bothered to study any of this who would say that the Bible is the most accurate historical document.
Nope.
But also, the existence of a God and what God thinks about morality is not something that is historically verifiable. So even with the Bible being historically accurate in some regards,
Yeah.
that tells you nothing about whether or not it's right about God. And by the way,
Right.
the correct answer from someone who understood Christianity, and I think I would at least get agreement here, is that for Christian apologists, you don't know that God is the good one because of the Bible. You know because of the inner witness of the Holy Spirit and how God has written his moral code on your heart. But
Hallelujah.
even if you're in that position, if I were to write my moral code on your heart, I would be the good one. If
Yeah.
Satan were to write his moral code on your heart, Satan would be the good one. If Trump were to write his moral code on your heart, well, it'd be a miracle because he can't write and he doesn't have a moral code. But if he did, he would be the one that comes out good. The point is, you didn't have a standard with which to judge God or the devil other than your own personal opinion. So your supposed objective foundation is neither objective in how or why it is the foundation, but it's not even objective in assessment. It is all coming from you.
Yeah. Man. Matt, you know
Sorry,
what I'm
I did that
curious
whole
of?
call.
No, that's fine. I'm curious to how do people who make that particular argument that the universe has to have a beginning, how do they end up settling on a God who doesn't have to have a beginning? Like,
Yeah.
how do we get there?
The original version of arguments like that, where everything has a cause, and then they're like, oh, what caused God? And then that's why they changed it to everything that has a beginning has a cause, but God didn't have a beginning. God has always existed. And so God is the uncaused cause.
Wow.
And so they think that there's a philosophical necessity, like,
Mhm.
oh, we can't have an infinite regress. Well, first of all, that's not necessarily the case, because we can have one directional infinite. Like
Yep.
there's an infinite series of positive integers, but it starts at one. It doesn't
Yeah.
go bidirectional. But if you just do whole numbers, there's an infinite bidirectional series. Not all infinities are created equal. And there's an infinite series of fractions of fractions of a whole number between 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And yet that's just one whole step integer. You can divide it up infinitely. And now in that case, it is capped on one end at 1, capped on one end at 2, and yet still somehow contains infinity. Because infinity isn't a quantity, it is a concept. It is a description of something that is not quantifiable. And so, anyway, I'm off the rails there. All right. Let's see if we get better evidence for God.
Let's go.
Mike's calling from Belize. No pronouns. Theist wants to present evidence for the Christian God. So, hey, Mike, how you doing?
Mike.
How you doing, Matt? Watched you for years. Glad to talk to you.
Awesome.
Cool. Awesome. Darante would like you to present evidence for your version of the Christian God.
Okay. Well, let me start off. This obviously this will not be sufficient evidence, but basically the evidence for there is we have 37 million churches, 3.2 million Christians, and we have yearly probably millions and millions of people attesting to personal experiences with God. And so, while that's not conclusive evidence, it is evidence for the existence of God.
Is it?
So, is the millions of people who testify experiences with Islam, is that evidence of Islam?
Yes, it is.
Cool.
And this is the point. I mean, the evidence is not conclusive, and the evidence can support different theories. I mean, there's a naturalistic explanation that could account for the adherence to churches, but the fact is that it's still evidence for the existence of God. Can we agree on that?
So no. I'd highly recommend, Mike, you jump over to my personal YouTube channel because I just released a video last Friday, I think, that specifically talks about evidence for a proposition. And you're describing facts that are consistent with a proposition. The problem is that if facts are consistent with multiple proposed explanations, then those facts are not evidence for any of them. Evidence for a proposition are facts and information that point to one potential proposed explanation over and above all of the others. And so the popularity of an idea, how popular something is in no way a testament to how true it is. There are plenty of popular religions. And when you say that it's not conclusive, I'm wondering, you said you were going to call in to present evidence for the Christian God, and then you presented something that wasn't evidence for any God, but was a fact consistent with a number of different things, including the popularity of a religion, whether the God exists or not. So what is your evidence for the Christian God?
Well, that's the one thing. Facts consistent with a theory is evidence. Now, are you familiar with the underdetermination of theory by data?
Mike. Facts consistent with a proposition are not evidence for that proposition. They're just facts consistent with the proposition. So, for example, if we come across a dead body and I propose that the butler did it, is the body evidence that the butler did it?
If the butler killed somebody, there would be a body, so it is evidence.
Okay.
You see, if the butler didn't kill anybody, there wouldn't be a body.
Mike, you desperately need to go watch my video because you are very confused about what counts as evidence for. The body is not evidence for the claim that the butler killed someone, because that same body is evidence for a million other proposed killers. Or stop talking. Something can't be evidence for 23,000 separate propositions. It is evident, it is facts consistent with 23,000 propositions, which means it's fucking useless for identifying which proposition. Evidence for a proposition points to one proposition more than all the others. That's what you've got to understand, and that's what you don't have for Christianity.
Well, you can have two competing scientific theories. They're both working at the same.
Mike, you are not listening, and you are not willing to learn. No, you cannot have two competing scientific theories. A theory in science is the graduation point. It's not a fucking
Yes.
hunch. It's not something somebody pulled out of their butt. You begin with observations, you propose explanations, and at the point where you have sufficient evidence to conclude that this specific proposed explanation is the one that is most probably correct, that is when it becomes a scientific theory. There's no such thing as competing scientific theories, both supported by evidence for. At that point, they are not yet the theory. And the evidence for is not merely facts consistent with. No matter how many times you try to respin this, it's going to fail. So, what evidence do you have that specifically points to the Christian God is real?
Well, because this is the real first call. I want to talk about evidence because obviously, you know, we're having this drill down. I misspoke earlier. Like I meant to say hypothesis. In science, you can have two competing hypotheses.
Yes, you can have multiple competing hypotheses, Mike. I don't need you to explain science to me. You called in to say that you want to present evidence for the Christian God. I really need you to do that. I'm going to back out. So Darante,
Well, I have. See, I have.
I will talk because I will just keep going at it and at it and at it like a bulldog. I need you to present the evidence, the facts that point to Christianity over and above any other proposed explanation for the phenomenon.
Okay, it's not a separate request. I can report facts. You need to throw in there over and above. Now, you have facts that will support two separate hypotheses.
Okay, Mike, you're not listening. Wow. This is the last time I'm going to do this, and then I'm going to let Darante decide what to do with you because I feel like I'm monopolizing the show, and I don't want to do that. But you're really starting to piss me off because you're not fucking listening. I don't care if you're hypothesizing that a God exists. You don't have a hypothesis because the God claim isn't testable or falsifiable. You would have to present a testable, falsifiable God claim for it to even count as a hypothesis. Please stop pretending that you know or understand scientific models and present, this is the last chance I'm giving you, present the evidence, the facts that point to the Christian God being true as more probable than any other fucking proposition. Last chance. Let's try this again.
Well, I stated it, so we disagree on it. So I'm not going to insult you and say the same thing over. We're at a point of disagreement about what counts as evidence. I mean, that's where we're at a point of disagreement on. You know, if somebody has an experience, that they just, that is consistent with other people's experience, that they basically attribute that to being an account with God. That is not conclusive. And there could be other competing explanations, but it is still evidence for that. No, it fits in line with what that would be.
Well, see, okay, well, my question here, for the people having the experience, are they qualified to know what the experience they're having is?
Well, to the extent that we're the most in tune with our experience, like we know we had an experience. Can that be misapprehended? Absolutely.
Are you the most qualified to know when you have high blood pressure?
No, that's a different kind of. I thought about experience like screaming.
It's a deeply personal
lived experiences.
That's a lived experience.
Well, high blood pressure is. It is that is an experience, but in the realms of religious experience, more phenomenological. I mean, you have an encounter like you're meeting a person. If I talk to somebody, I have evidence that I did, and I have that experience to go off of. A spiritual encounter may not necessarily be from God. I'm not saying that it is.
Okay, hold up. Here's the question, though.
If there was a God, then that would be a line.
Mike, yeah. How do you know the encounter is spiritual?
You don't conclusively know. You don't conclusively. That's the point. I'm not saying you know it conclusively.
So
but it's a viable explanation.
Then isn't neurology also a viable explanation?
Well, there's two levels of explanatory, because there's always going to be a mechanistic. Like my phone call to you.
Do you see what you're trying to do? Mike, do you see what you're trying to do is that
No.
even though, it's already been demonstrated that your approach to this is fallacious, and you've already demonstrated that,
It's
that you
not
don't
fallacious.
actually have
No.
you don't actually have a relationship with what evidence is. You're literally trying to make your
No, I
claim
don't.
true. That's all you're trying to do. Because what you're
No,
saying is,
I'm
if
not trying
someone
to
is
make it
having
clear.
an experience, even if that experience matches, even if that experience is absolutely contradictory to my claim, if my claim and their experience have one thing in common, it's supportive of my claim. And the problem that you're missing, especially with the illustration that Matt gave, is that no, a dead body is not evidence that a butler killed somebody. It's not even evidence that somebody was murdered. It's only evidence that a person has died. And there are several different possibilities or ways that they could have died until you have some type of evidence. Do you see how that works? So what you just did, my dude, was you just unjustly accused the butler with no evidence and was convicted. You was convinced that you had all the evidence in the world
No,
to send the butler to jail. That's what you just did.
No, a dead body is evidence that a murder happened. If you have a murder, you have to be a dead body.
Hey, hang on.
We agree on that, right?
Is Jesus Christ the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords, and God?
Look, it's a separate question. We're still talking on evidence. I mean,
I know it's a separate fucking question. Answer it.
Is what?
I know it's a separate fucking question.
Sorry.
Answer it.
Okay. Sorry, repeat the question. Is Jesus the King of Kings? Is that what you want to know?
Is Jesus God?
Sorry, repeat the question. Make sure.
Is Jesus God?
Jesus is divine.
So that is the same.
The Trinity's real confusing.
Stop fucking talking. Jesus Christ.
They don't me seriously. Don't cuss at me, bro. I'm not cussing
I'll fucking cuss at you as much as I fucking want to. Because when you say Jesus is God,
that? Why?
Because you're fucking interrupting. Shut up and let me finish and you won't get cussed at, dipshit.
Have you never fucking watched the show? Like, what the fuck?
So here we go. Let's try this again. When you say Jesus is divine, you are saying the butler did it. You have reached a conclusion about the butler while you're trying to pretend that you have evidence for the butler. And then when we point out the problem with the category and nature of the evidence that you're presenting, you claim, oh, well, it doesn't prove anything. But you're the one that's reached a conclusion. I would agree, because I had experiences as a Christian that people have experiences that they interpret as God. But the fact that they interpret it that way does not mean they're right and does not mean they have evidence for it. And yet you, while you sit here and acknowledge that you do not have conclusive evidence, have made a conclusion. And that is where you are unreasonable, which is our point. Why do you think it's okay to reach a conclusion based on inconclusive evidence?
Well, hold up. I mean, we're not going to full belief set here. So, I mean, so I'm probably not.
I'm going to mute you. I asked a very, 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 very important and specific question. And your answer is, well, hold up. We're not going to whole belief system. Motherfucker, I didn't say anything about a whole belief system. You made the claim that Jesus was divine. You made the claim that your evidence was inconclusive. I pointed out the hypocrisy of reaching a conclusion based on inconclusive evidence. My question to you, which you tried to avoid again, is why do you think it's okay for you to reach a conclusion based on inconclusive evidence? Last chance.
Reach a conclusion with insufficient evidence. Okay. I am not reaching a conclusion just solely on that. I'm not saying this is conclusive.
Why do you think it's okay for you to reach a conclusion based on evidence you acknowledge is inconclusive, which is exactly what has happened here? I don't know how many more ways I can say this.
In certain circumstances, it is reasonable to make a decision with inconclusive evidence. There are life experiences that require that.
Mike,
Oh, Mike.
let me ask you this then.
It's-
Why is believing in a God something that it's okay to do on inconclusive evidence?
Because you have to make a choice about it. It's a
No,
live
you
just for
fucking
experience.
don't. No, you fucking
Uh-oh.
don't, Mike. And that's the problem. You think you have to make a decision. You don't. I'm not convinced at all about
Mm-mm.
almost any God claim. The gods that are logically contradictory, the ones that cannot exist, I'm fine with believing that they don't exist, but I still haven't reached a conclusion on any number of them. It's okay. And it is, in fact, the right answer to say, I don't know. But instead, you've become convinced by the popularity. Oh, there's 37 million churches. There's 3.2 million Christians. There's plenty of people who are expressing personal experience. Well, congratulations. That is an argumentum ad populum, which is a fallacious argument. And it isn't evidence for anything. You don't understand what counts as evidence for. You want to claim that there's conclusive evidence and inconclusive evidence. Okay, even under your categories, you are admitting that you made a conclusion, you reached a conclusion on inconclusive evidence, which means you are in fact being irrational. And then when this is pointed out, you're like, yeah, but sometimes you got to make a decision. Man, when the house is on fire, you got to make a decision. But you don't have to make a decision right now about how to invest your money. You don't have to make a decision right now about what to do next Sunday. You don't have to make a decision right now about which God you should be praying to. And in fact, if you are sitting there praying to the wrong God, what do you think that the right God is going to do when he finds out that you bought into the wrong God based on inconclusive
Yikes.
evidence? What's going to happen to you then?
Well, let me point this out to those. Basically, the example the
I'm sorry, Mike. I don't know why this is difficult for you, but every time I ask you a question, you ignore the question. So, if you believe
they're
in the
loaded
wrong
for the
God,
loaded questions. I mean, they're loaded questions.
no, they're not loaded questions, Mike. You're a coward. I'm going to ask you one more time. If you
Well, I'm
find,
not
if it turns out,
insulting you, man. I called up.
Oh, my
I'm,
That's
I'm
all
not
right.
insulting
I'm
you.
not getting it.
I'm not insulting you. I'm accurately describing your behavior. If you believe in the wrong God, what do you think the right God will do to you for believing in the wrong God based on inconclusive evidence?
Nothing. They'll accept it. Don't think it'll be an issue. Just like I
Cool.
wouldn't get upset at a kid if they made a wrong decision.
Okay, Mike. So here's the follow-up. You ready?
Mhm.
I got a follow-up. You ready?
Yep. Okay.
What would the right God do to you if you said, I'm not convinced, so I can't believe in you yet?
What I would think would happen would be okay. I mean, you're just missing out on a relationship.
So,
You wouldn't be
you're not
punished for it. You just
advocating,
wouldn't have the relationship.
you're not advocating for the Christian God then, because the Christian God is not just going to say, okay, you didn't believe in me, no big deal, right?
I disagree on that. So we have a different
Really?
theology, but I disagree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's because I didn't make mine shit up on my own. I actually went with what the Bible says.
Well, I'm not a biblical literist. I mean, the Bible's written by men. There's going to be mistakes. It's written by men. There's going to be mistakes.
How do you know then?
Maybe
How
I've
do
got
you
something
know?
wrong.
How do you know? What do you know about soteriology?
What's that?
Soteriology?
Find the term for me so I don't get it wrong. I've heard it before, but I don't hear it that often.
Soteriology is the study of what one must do to be saved. Without pointing to the Bible, how do you know what you must do to be saved? And what are you being saved from or to?
Well, I am pointing to something from the Bible. I'm not saying the Bible's no information. I'm just saying it's not going to be infallible.
Mike, okay, wow, this is so frustrating. This is
In
absolutely
the Bible and tradition.
But Mike, listen, you are the most frustrating tap dancer I've fucking talked to in weeks. So you're saying some of the Bible's accurate and some of it's not, right?
Yes. Absolutely.
How do you
Some
tell?
can be true, some
Just,
can't be true.
Mike, when I ask a yes or no question, I promise you I only want one fucking word because I'm building to something. Now here's a question that's not a yes or no question. How do you tell which parts of the Bible are right and which parts are wrong?
Through reason and analysis is what you have to do. Is to go through reason and analysis.
What reason and analysis?
Like any other
do?
text.
What reason and analysis can you do to determine what the correct criteria are for salvation and what are the consequences for those who aren't saved based on what the Bible says?
Well, you're going to take some of the base facts. Jesus is logos. You take the nature of a divine being. You take people's accounts from it, just like you would anybody else. If I go out somewhere, I get stories from 6 different people. I'm going to start piecing those together and see what makes most sense. I'm going to use that same similar process with the Bible.
Mike, the question I asked had nothing to do with whether or not Jesus was logos or nature or divine. It was about how do you evaluate the biblical claims about salvation to determine what is actually true?
That's what I'm getting at. You start at some baselines. If Jesus is logos, that means reason and logic. He should be reasonable. If you come across something,
Mike, how do you know that Jesus is logos?
It's an operating heuristic.
How do you know that Jesus is logos? You are already beginning with a statement of the Bible and determining that it's true.
I know.
And I'm asking you how you determine it's true.
You got to take from Jesus' logos. I'm getting that from the Bible. I'm taking that. Okay,
I know, Mike.
How do you know if it's
from the Bible? I know the Bible better than almost anybody you've ever been in church with. I'm asking you, how do you know whether or not it's true? You don't get to assume that because the Bible says Jesus is logos, that you know what that means, or what its significance is, or that it is true. This is your problem. You are your own God, Mike. You are determining what you find real and what you find not. And you are imposing that over the Bible. When the Bible specifically talks about salvation, what must be done for salvation, there are various disputes within Christendom about what is specifically required, which is why there's over 1,000 denominations of Christianity. And there's also disputes over what happens to those of us who are not saved, although I have pastor friends who say that once saved, always saved, and so they're planning to see me in heaven. And there are others who say that I've committed the unforgivable sin, which I don't think is possible because I have not attributed to Satan that which, yes, did I or didn't I?
I'm so sorry. You finished, man. I don't want to interrupt you.
You said yes, and I was trying to figure out what you were interrupting to say yes for.
Oh, sorry. I was agreeing. I was following you along. I'm sorry, Matt. I'm just saying that to follow along. Apologies.
Does the Bible say that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life, right? Is that statement true?
I believe so, yes. I believe so, yes.
How can you tell?
How can you tell definitively? You can't.
Jesus fucking.
Then
don't call me back until you can, because I'm not interested in your opinion. You are here to demonstrate something. You called in and said you want to present evidence for the Christian God. And even when I cite chapter and verse, no, you didn't. You don't even know what evidence for is. And even when I cite chapter and verse and ask you, how do you know it's true? You're like, well, you can't prove that it's true. Then you shouldn't believe it.
You can't.
You have no business believing something that you cannot demonstrate as true.
But that's true about everything. Certainly,
yes, it's true about everything, which is why I'm a skeptic and I apply it to all claims, including religious claims. And you, even if you understood skepticism, are suspending it for your preferred religion. That's where we part ways. You may apply principles of skepticism somewhere else in life. I kind of doubt it. I kind of think that you're likely to think like this in a lot of different areas, but you are not applying skepticism to your standards of evidence or the facts surrounding Christianity. But, you know,
Wait,
I don't
okay,
know.
hold up. I mean, hold up a second. Before you start belittling my intelligence and things like that, you know.
Okay, Mike,
Mike.
before you start whining about how I'm observing what you've said and commenting on it, I did not belittle your intelligence. I talked about what you don't understand. That's not intelligence, that's knowledge. That's a separate issue. But please try again, since you can't seem to demonstrate anything. Go ahead.
Okay, couple of things. When I call out the evidence I'm putting out there is more about the fact, you know, what qualifies as evidence. You know, if I walk outside and the ground is wet, that is evidence that it rained. It's also
it's fucking
evidence
not.
some of major.
No, it's
No,
not.
no, it's fucking not. I have a sprinkler system on my front yard. If I walk out front and the ground is wet, you don't know whether it rained or whether or not I had my sprinkler on. It is not evidence that it rained. It could also be the morning fucking dew. Evidence for a proposition points towards one proposition and not at others. And so what we have is the fact the ground is wet. What are the proposed explanations for why the ground is wet? One proposal is it's wet because it rained. Another one is it's wet because it's the morning dew. Another one is it's wet because I ran the sprinkler. Another one is it's wet because the kids were playing with the hose. Of those four proposed explanations, the wet grass points to all four of them equally, which means it is not, in fact, evidence for any of them. It is merely a fact consistent with all four of them. This is why you devalue the wet grass. And by the way, the wet grass is the observation. The four candidate explanations are the propositions. The observation isn't evidence for a proposition. This is the claim. The grass is wet because it's rained. The grass is wet because the sprinkler was on. The wet grass points to both of them. It's not evidence for that. Of that devalued piece, you can start saying, the sprinkler system, I've got evidence the sprinkler system hasn't been run. I don't have any kids. The hose has been turned off. And it's now 3 p.m, so it's probably not the dew. And I see dark clouds, and the weather report suggested that there was an X% chance of rain and all this. You can lead to a cumulative case that one of the more likely explanations is for the wet grass is that it rained. But the wet grass is not evidence that it rained.
Yeah.
In that overall case, it's a piece.
Wow. You were muted that whole time, and you were talking that whole fucking time, which is why you were already talking when I pulled you off. I don't know. Go ahead,
No.
Mike.
Okay, give me like 20 seconds. Yes, all right. If I last night, if I thought it rained, and I walk outside and the ground is not wet, I would say it did not rain. If I walk outside and the ground is wet, I'm going, it may have rained. Something else could be true, but that is a piece that starts building a case for the fact that it rained. Now, just that one fact is not giving me work, it's just one data point. And one data point can point a lot of different directions. But I can take the fact that the grass is wet. Then I can look up and see, the forecast called for rain last night. Now I've got 2 data points.
That's your 20 seconds.
That's 2 data points. Okay.
Your 20 seconds, you were already wrong, because you said, let's say I walk out in the morning and I want to know if it rained last night. And if the grass isn't wet, then I'm going to conclude it didn't rain. Well, that's a flawed conclusion, because it may well have rained last night and your grass might be dry by the time you checked it. You don't know shit about standards of evidence and what counts as evidence for something. Then you say, if the grass is wet, I conclude it may have rained. That is a completely dishonest and reasonable conclusion. If I walk out in the morning and I find the grass is wet, I could say, maybe it rained. Because yes, rain is a potential explanation for wet grass. We know this because we can observe it while it's raining, before it's raining, after it's raining. We have mountains of evidence that rain happens. We have evidence that wet grass is consistent with rain. You know what we don't have any evidence for? God. You know what we don't have any reason to consider a candidate explanation? God. You want God to be a candidate explanation for any number of other things. When I listed the reasons that the grass might be wet, I left one off. Reason number 5 that the grass might be wet is that God made the grass wet. So, how did you rule out God made the grass wet?
Damn.
Yes. Hold on. The fact that still the point of the fact that the grass being wet is evidence that it rains. Not.
No, Mike, it's fucking not.
Oh.
I just asked you a specific fucking question. Try one more fucking time before I fucking hang up on you. When you come out and find the grass wet, how did you rule out the possibility that the grass is wet because God wanted it to be wet?
Off one point, you can't rule anything out of singular data points.
Okay. So now we have wet grass. I have no idea what the explanation is for wet grass. Maybe it rained. Maybe the sprinklers were on. Maybe God magically made it wet. So my position, Darante, let's say you come out and you find wet grass, and we have 5 proposed explanations, one of which I don't even think should be a candidate, that God did it, but we'll just go and include it. What conclusion can you reach based on that?
If I come out, the only conclusion that I can come to is that my grass is wet. That is the only conclusion that I can come to at that moment.
You have nothing to go between those 5 explanations. And yet Mike is concluding sometimes that it didn't rain. And Mike has concluded that Jesus is divine, even though there are other explanations he hasn't ruled out.
No, if I walk out and I see the wet grass, I'm going to be in the same shelf. We got about 4 or 5 reasonable things that could have caused that.
Mike, I'm going to do this. On the right hand, my grass is wet. And on my left hand, the universe exists. There's 2 proposals for the wet grass. It rained or God did it. And there's 2 proposals for the universe exists. Natural explanation or God did it. On my left hand here, you are looking at the universe existed and concluding God did it. And on my right hand, you are looking at the wet grass and saying, I can't make a determination. So for the last time, because I've asked you this before, what justification do you have for choosing that God is the explanation for the origin of the universe? Last chance.
Off one point, you don't. So I'm saying it's different. You have to build a.
Yep.
So off of that one point, what you're saying is the mere existence of the universe is not sufficient to reach a conclusion about the origin of the universe. Is that correct?
Exactly.
Cool.
Exactly.
Then what fucking evidence do you have that warrants your conclusion?
Well, back up. We're going 2 different things. So, I mean, I'm talking about.
No, I'm back. I backed up. This is the last time I'm backing this ass up, and you should say thank you, Daddy.
Yeah.
I'm asking you. You called in to say wants to present evidence for the Christian God. We have spent 30 minutes now trying to get you to realize that the existence of the universe is not fucking evidence for the cause of the universe. And you keep doing this. Well, it's a cumulative case. It's this, it's this, it's this. Yes. What actual piece of evidence do you have that points to your conclusion? Listen, I'm gonna say it twice. What piece of evidence do you have that points to your conclusion that God is the explanation for the universe? What piece of evidence do you have that points to your conclusion that God is the cause of the universe? That's all I need to know.
Well, I never made that claim. Whoa, I never made the.
Mike, it says right here, wants to present evidence for the Christian God. Is that what you told the call screen?
Exactly. I'm not saying. I said present evidence for the Christian God. I didn't say God necessarily created the universe.
Are you
I
saying
mean,
that
I don't,
the Christian God
I don't know
didn't
that.
create the universe?
I think it's more likely God's a feature of the universe than creator of the universe, to be honest with you.
Okay.
God is foundational, but God is not necessarily
Here's the big
foundational
problem,
creator,
Mike.
not the same thing.
Here's the big problem, Mike.
Yeah.
You don't understand Christianity. You are using the label
At all.
Christian while cherry picking bits and pieces from something you've never studied and don't understand. Goodbye. Call in and defend a deistic God next time, not the Christian God.
Yes.
Because we're both ex-Christians. We ain't playing that shit.
Yeah. Nope. Damn it.
Hey, Nick's calling from South Carolina. Nick says a lot of the Bible should be metaphorically perceived. Hey, Nick, how do we tell which parts?
Hey, how you doing?
I'm all right.
Hello.
Hey, I just really want to say before we get started, I really like y'all's show. I think it's really cool that you guys take, other people's viewpoints and, do your best to listen to it. I think it's really cool.
Okay.
Awesome sauce.
How do we tell which parts of the Bible should be taken literally and which parts shouldn't?
Honestly, if you want to know my honest truth, I think honestly almost all of it should be perceived as metaphorical. I think a guy kind of touched on it a little bit, the last guy, even though he was a little, crazy with some of the things he was saying, in the sense that he did kind of hit the nail on the head in the sense that, us as humans still actually wrote it. You know what I mean? So I guess my point is, you can either choose to live life in a wrong, right mentality where you think people are wrong and you're right, like you're the main character. Whereas if you choose to look at it in like a right mentality, it kind of gives you a little bit more peace and it allows you to kind of listen to other people's viewpoints a little bit more. So I guess with that being said, anything that I choose to read.
Are you saying that? So I'm not convinced that a God exists, but you are convinced that a God exists, right? And like actually exists, not metaphorically exists.
Yes, sir.
So you're convinced that a real God exists, and I'm not convinced of that. Is there a right
Sure.
answer to that question? Is it possible that you're right?
I would say that it is possible that I am right because I believe that our fundamental makeup is too complex to not have been created by something. So that's why I would assume
Well, first of all,
How do you know
that
that?
that is a logical fallacy.
Yes, sir.
You're basically asserting that it's possible that you're right because you personally don't understand how some life so complex could have arisen without a God. But that is fallacious, and that is also independent of whether or not it's possible for you to be right. So you said that, if you think that I'm right and somebody else is wrong, evidently there's some kind of problem with that. I think I'm right and you're wrong. Is there a way we can find out?
I guess the best way that I can put it, it's kind of very difficult, and that just comes from communication because, whenever we speak, we're pretty much just using words to try and create a picture for someone else to formulate the same picture in their brain, and then we get on the same page.
No, I
this-
don't need you to describe what communication is. I don't think that's relevant at all. I asked
Oh,
if
yes,
there's
sir.
a way for us to tell which of us is right.
In regards to this specific question at hand.
Sure, but you know what? On any issue where you think there's truth where we might disagree, but on this one specific, you're convinced there's a God. I'm not convinced. As a matter of fact, I may be convinced that there isn't a God, depending on how you define him. The question is, you started by saying that the Bible should be metaphorically perceived. Then you went, we got you to acknowledge that you believe in a non-metaphoric God. So I don't care about the metaphor. I don't know that we have any way to tell what parts should be metaphor, what's not. But if you believe in an actual God, and then my question is, how can we tell whether or not you are correct about God?
Well, I would say I'm correct about God because we're still speaking about God as if he exists right now currently. One of the best things that I guess was ever said to me was,
no, first of all, that is ridiculous and asinine. I just got done before this show having a conversation about the Fantastic Four. Does that mean the Fantastic Four are real? No.
the Fantastic Four would be real in that conversational sense. So I guess that's what I'm saying in the
No,
sense that
no, Nick. I
Oh my
asked you if you
goodness.
believed in a real God or a metaphoric God. I'm not asking about fictional beings. I'm not asking about metaphoric Fantastic Four. You said that because we're talking about God, but we're not talking about God. What we're talking about is whether or not belief in God is warranted. So let's get it straight what we're talking about, whether or not belief in God is warranted, whether or not we can tell the difference between the claim God exists being right or wrong. We're not talking about God, we're talking about epistemology and evidence. So get that right to begin with, and then explain how we can tell whether or not you're right.
okay, sounds good. So I guess one of the best ways that I look at it and why I would assume that there would be a creator to answer, my first statement would be
Okay,
just
no,
simply put
Nick,
how.
Nick,
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Wow.
I didn't ask why you would assume there's a creator. I literally don't give a
Mm-mm.
fuck what you assume. What I asked
Yes, sir.
is, how can we tell if you're right?
Yep.
How can I tell if I'm right? I
How
would
can
say by
we tell if you're right?
how can you guys tell that I'm right?
How can we,
Yep.
all of us, determine that you are right?
I would say it's it's how you could how your life starts reflecting what you start to believe is how you can tell something to be right or wrong.
No. What
Wow.
is it about anyone's life that could confirm that you are right about God?
I would say that the idea of God solely began because it's separating a good and an evil.
Okay. I didn't ask about where the idea of God began because I don't think that you have any way of doing that. We're still, the history of religion and God concepts is still a disputed area. But what I
Mhm.
asked is, what is it about something's life that would demonstrate you are right about God?
Well, that goes more into the perception of what we would all perceive as what's good and what's evil throughout our lives. That's what would determine something is either right nor wrong.
Nick, how does
Oh man.
what you perceive to be good or evil in any way demonstrate that there is a God?
Because that would be the difference between us and a lot of other living creatures on here that we have the
Wow.
ability to do such a thing to begin with.
I
Oh
I
man.
give up. I concede.
Man.
Durante, my most
Uh,
sincere apologies. Please try to fix this because I don't know
oh my
how to keep
goodness.
asking questions and having people give an answer to some other fucking subject entirely.
Well, I do apologize.
Nick,
I am trying to answer
Nick,
it, correctly. I just,
can I ask you
maybe
something, Nick?
possibly I'm
Just
just not.
what's your
Yes, sir.
background, Nick, as far as your study background in pertaining this?
Study background. My family is just, fully Catholic. I more or less just grew up reading the Bible and kind of taking it more or less, my own way, if that makes a lot of sense. I've done a lot of looking into like the Baptist, the Southern Baptist, just stuff like this. And, I tend to disagree a lot with theists, even in general, which is why, one of the reasons I like to call this show. That way I can even try and get, other viewpoints on it. So I guess
Okay.
that's where it stems from, is just me ultimately just reading it through and through, listening to a bunch of other debates. I've heard, Matt on a bunch of other debates with other people. I like to just listen to people's viewpoints. That's where I would say that it, comes from. That's pretty much all I
Okay.
do in my free time, is trying to listen to other people's opinions.
I kind of figured that tracks because everything you have provided tonight just sounded like a convolution or convolution. I don't even know if that's a real word. Just like a bouquet of opinions, and it all sounds like speculation. And this is why I was curious, because you made quite a few claims. One of the last claims that you just made was about this is what separates basically humans from animals. And so what I'm very curious about is how much study have you done in zoology or the psychology of animals?
Oh, well, my brother is an entomologist, so we get into it, quite frequently, about a lot of things. We have some pretty in-depth conversations. And what I meant just
Okay,
difference,
let me
in
ask you the question one more
oh,
time. Let me ask you the question one more time. How much study have you done?
Personally,
to be able to come to that conclusion? Yeah.
quite a bit. I mean, again, this is all I pretty much do in my spare time when I'm not working is just looking into
All
this
right.
type of
Cite
stuff.
something.
What makes us different?
Cite something. Cite something that supports that conclusion. Then,
Okay, so I'll
because
give you an example. Like,
my concern is from a biological standpoint. Is how do you classify humans as separate from animals?
I would say because we have a better way of
No,
tapping
not.
into our
Hold up,
conscious.
Nick. I think what you're misunderstanding is not this one. I don't want from your opinion. How do you biologically class humans as separate from animals?
How? Oh, biologically, there's
Yes.
none. That's why we're in the animalistic category. I mean,
Right.
we're mammals. Yes, sir.
Okay.
So it would be our
So then
psychological
how can you
makeup that
build a
would make us
claim
different.
that humans are separate from animals? Like that was just your claim that
Yes,
we can do this thing that animals can't do, but if we are animals, then doesn't that mean that animals then indeed can do it because we are animals?
well, that's why I was saying where we differ from animals would be more in our psychological makeup, what we're
How
able to
do we
perceive
differ
and how
from
we're able to.
animals if we are animals, Nick? Why are you not seeing that contradiction there, sir? We
Well,
are
I agree
animals.
first and foremost, and then I believe you asked what would be the difference. So I was just trying to state the difference. So I agree that there is similarities. We are, in fact, mammals. We are animals in ourselves. You know, we reproduce, milk, all that stuff. But again, I believe the difference would come from our ability to make our decisions based on a good and bad perception, and we can even tap into that
How
a
do you
little
know
bit more.
other animals aren't able to make those decisions?
We have the ability to do that at a slightly stronger sense, if that makes
How
a
do
little bit
you
of
know
sense.
that? See, I've asked you, how do you know 3 times, and not one time have you given an answer to the question. You just keep updating the
Um,
claim.
well, would you
How
like
do you
an
know something about these animals, man? Is the question.
so I'll give you an example. Like birds just migrate whenever it gets cold. They just
No,
leave, right?
listen. I didn't ask for an example, Nick. I asked for evidence. How do you know? And actually, I didn't even ask for evidence. I asked you to cite a source of something you've studied that suggested it.
Well, I was
Because
just
my
giving you an
concern here,
example.
Nick, is that you are making
Mhm.
claims and you haven't even moved out of the speculation stage. You are stuck in speculation. I think something, so it could possibly be true. So that's what I'm going to defend. There are more steps you need to take, bruh. After your speculation, let's do some studying. See if anybody else thinks this. Maybe they've done some of the hard work for you. And then, even after you've done that studying, your next thing, because that was going to be my next level of questioning, is how have you tested these ideas? How have you engaged these ideas with any type of experimentation? Because that's what's going to qualify you to actually have some type of hypothesis about this. You got to have something to test. And at this moment, this is all just speculation. And that's why it's just unraveled from the beginning, because you're not building on anything. And the problem is you're not even trying to be aware when we're identifying the fact that you're not standing on anything solid. So instead of saying, oh, maybe the problem is with how I reason, you just reach in the bag for another bag of tricks, man. And instead, what you should be doing is saying, wait a minute, before I presented this, I was 100% convinced that this was valid. I was convinced that this was accurate. This has now been demonstrated to me as not accurate. So instead of me pulling something from that same fucking bag, let me see what's wrong with me. What am I doing wrong to not be able to come to the right conclusions? And so a wise thing to do in moments like this is, instead of moving on, is to do everything you can to figure out, why does that convince me but not them? Does that make sense, Nick?
Yes, sir. I'm following you.
Awesome. Awesome. All right. So
Yeah.
my last
Yes, sir.
question is, man, how do you come to believe, and this is just a personal question. Now you answer it if you don't got to, but how do you call yourself a Christian if you believe the Bible is all metaphor? How do you get there? That's just curious for me.
It's,
It's just irreconcilable for me, but I know it's subjective.
yes, sir. So again, I guess I can take any verse from time to time. So if we look at maybe like, let's say Ecclesiastes, it says, for in much wisdom there is much sorrow. Whoever increases knowledge increases grief. So, I mean, you hear something like that, and to me, it just means, hey, we have a tendency to overthink ourselves to death, which is why we even find
Okay,
ourselves
hold
in
on,
this
hold on, hold on,
conversation.
hold on. Can I show you can I show you the problem with that type of, like, there's so much wrong with
Sure.
that. Yikes. I love music, right? I'm a huge Jay-Z fan. Should I now believe that Jay-Z is the son of God because there's something in the Blueprint album that really spoke to me in a deep part of my life?
Oh, no, sir. But if you don't mind, I guess
Should I
where
believe that
I feel
Jay-Z's
like
lyrics are 100% truth because they were encouraging?
again, I think the only thing that I would like, and I feel like just it wasn't even really touched on, was the fact that I keep trying to give an example of how I feel, and I'm trying to perceive this again in our psychological
Oh,
makeup
because
more than anything.
we don't care about how you
And I feel like
feel.
that's just the only thing where I haven't really been touched on by you guys after the fact. Is that's just what I'm trying to explain, is why it's almost all metaphorical, because it's just explaining what us as humans tend to see on a day-to-day basis, are these stories in the Bible, if that makes sense. It's just kind of explaining
How is
what's
any
going
other
on with
book
us.
not doing that, Nick? How is any other book not doing that? How is Star Wars not doing that? How is the Odyssey
Well, 'cause, I
not
mean, we
doing
don't
that?
really
How
live
is
it,
the ancient
I mean,
Egyptian book of the dead? Just because you don't mean millions of other people don't. Are you kidding me, Nick? Are you that obtuse? Are you really going to limit the experiences of other people to your ignorance and what you don't know? So you're going to say, because this is my worldview and my worldview includes this God everywhere I turn, the other people who have a worldview that doesn't include God, they don't exist, so that I can feel like this is what everybody believes.
so I think again, I think I'm just maybe just what I'm stating is slightly just being misconstrued a little bit. So I'm not sure exactly where you guys maybe think that, what I'm necessarily getting wrong or being obtuse about.
Well, the fact that nothing you've said has been coherent so far. You've literally just made a bunch of speculations. We've investigated how you even know these things. You could not cite one source. You're just saying stuff after the other to protect what you believe, and you can't even prove the source of what you believe. You don't even believe the source of your beliefs is actually a source of beliefs, and yet you cannot cite the source of your beliefs. So, like, how are you coming to these beliefs? And your answer is ultimately, well, we all just have these thoughts in our head, but I want to tell you how I feel, instead of pointing to you to any type of psychological, neurological evidence or research that would support this idea, which is what I asked you for, is just cite something that you've read, that you've studied. I still wouldn't take that as evidence, but then I would actually believe that you were being genuine. But the fact that you have not done such lets me know that you're not being genuine. You're like a kid farting in the bathtub, laughing at the bubbles. What I'd love for you to do is, if you were seriously interested in this, is actually do the research. Is actually, instead of just sitting there saying, nope, this is what thought is. You are literally robbing yourself of wonder just by allowing it to stay right there within the realm of your opinions and your speculation. Use the scientific method. If you honestly believe this, use the scientific method, prove it right, save the world. Call back in and let people like me, Matt Forrest, and everybody else know that you finally proved that God exists. What disappoints me so much is that y'all claim to be convinced and won't do a lick of the fucking research to prove what you actually believe in. And that's what y'all keep calling and demonstrating over and over again. I'm sorry. I'm
Okay.
done.
No,
I
no,
got
no,
high blood pressure.
no,
I can let it get up
no,
there.
no, that's honestly, I have high blood pressure too, so I understand completely. It's
I
a
like you, Nick.
terrible disease, man. Yeah, it's a terrible disease. It really is. But I guess again where I was getting at to begin with, and I guess my overall point where I was saying, what makes me believe, because that is a difficult question to answer, is, and again, I still feel like you really haven't touched on it, and I do apologize if I'm being obtuse or misreading it. Again, what I'm simply stating is, how we make any decision in life is based off of a good or bad mentality. Even if it's something as simple as, like, okay, I don't like peas, I'm never going to eat peas again.
Matt,
Or if
I'm
somebody
patting it
again,
back over to you, Matt.
Okay.
It's yours, Matt.
no, I appreciate it. Again, I'm just trying to see where the differences lies, because I feel like, again, my point trying to present to you guys, why I believe in a creator and a good entity that created all of us is just simply how our perception of life truly is. Mine, yours, how we make decision is all based around the same thing. Whether it's good or bad, that's how we're going to make any decision in life. again, your good and bad compass, moral compass, whatever everybody else likes to call it, is going to be different than mine. But regardless, you're still following either a good or a bad path.
The fact that we have different opinions about what is or isn't moral is going to be the result of what influences we've had and what we've become convinced of. But are you suggesting that there isn't a right answer?
I'm suggesting the fact that that's how we all base our decisions is the reason why we are.
Nick, I don't know why you feel that you called in to do a book report on what you suspect about human nature and metaphorical gods. I'm asking you questions about actual facts. You think there's an actual God, not a metaphorical God. And you think that we just all have our own different views on morality, which I know we do. I've spent the last 20 years arguing every fucking week on shows like this from people who have different views on morality. But if we evaluate a particular situation and we're going to do a moral assessment, is there a right answer or not?
To you, yes, individually.
No, that's not how fucking right works. This whole notion of to you, things aren't true to you. They are true whether you fucking accept it or not. There's a fucking moon around a planet in another galaxy, whether you're aware of it or not, whether you accept it or not. It's not true for me that the Earth orbits the sun. It's just fucking true.
So then again, I guess it's like again, how you're asking me to prove how the God is true. I'm using the example of.
No, I didn't, Nick. No, I fucking didn't. I don't know how many times we can keep asking questions and you guys don't answer them and then tell us we asked you a question we didn't.
Well, but that's why, again, I apologize. I'm doing my best to follow. So that's why I'm saying I'm doing my best. I'm not
convinced. It'd be really good. Sir. Just listen to the fucking words that come out of my mouth, pause for a second and say, and repeat them back to me and then answer them. And so here's the question. If we constructed a specific scenario where one person, under a set of circumstances, cut another person's head off, is there a correct moral evaluation for that situation?
I believe there would be two of them.
Jesus fucking Christ, Nick.
Wow. I'm terrified. This is
okay. No. We're at the point where it's become clear now. Hey, Nick, we can't continue to have a conversation because you don't understand what truth is. If you think that there can be two competing truths about one thing. See, that's a violation of the foundational laws of identity, non-contradiction, and excluded middle. You are arguing that the foundations of logic don't apply. That doesn't work for us. And it's how you've gotten into this. The Bible should be metaphorical, even though I think there's a real God. You don't understand what truth is or how to get there. So I'm going to move on. Thanks.
Thanks, Nick. Yikes.
Well, here we got somebody whose name is supposedly Zarathustra. Zarathustra. Pronouns are he, him, who says Matt and Dante are just repeating Nietzsche's slave morality and other pseudoscientific psychoanalysis. This doesn't prove anything. Well, that's simply not true there, Zarathustra. I'm not in any way repeating Nietzsche's slave morality, because if I was, I would be inverting a master morality. And that's not what I'm doing. I've set what the foundation is. So meanwhile, we're not the ones with something to prove. We're responding to people who think that they can prove God. So what do you got?
Yep.
You're calling from the web client. I knew it.
That's what that was.
I called it.
Wow.
Thanks for by the way, that sound. I mean, I should make that my ringtone, but I don't still have your mom's number.
Oh man.
All right, let's try it again.
I'm
Manuel's
slow.
calling from California. Professor Him says the best evidence for God is the beginning of the universe. Hey, Manuel, did you hear the call earlier where we talked about the beginning of the universe?
No, I haven't heard it.
Okay. So, my take on the universe is that I have no way of investigating the state of the universe prior to the tiniest fraction of a second, something called the Planck time, after
Yeah.
it began to expand. And I don't know how anybody else can explore it. So how do you determine what the beginning of the universe was?
Well, according to physics, energy cannot be created or destroyed, but
No,
we know
no.
there was a beginning of time.
Manuel,
Okay,
Manuel,
yes.
did God create energy?
What that's the mystery. Nobody
No,
knows
no, it's
how
not
energy was
a mystery.
created.
No, Manuel. You said that according to physics, energy can't be created or destroyed, which is, by the way, false. And we could get our physicist friend on here to do that. But then you seem to think that God created the universe, which would be matter and energy. So
Which is
evidently, according to
supernatural
you,
because it can be created.
so what you're saying is physics
Magic.
has something to say about matter and energy within the universe that we can investigate. And you're making a claim about matter and energy outside of our ability to investigate. So we're back to my
Yes.
original question. Yes, I know. We're back to my original question which was this. I'm not aware of any way to investigate that. How can you show what the beginning of the universe was? You don't get to go to physics because physics has nothing to say prior to that instant.
That's the problem. Physical laws cannot explain the beginning of the world. They just can't. So if it
Yes.
can't, it must be supernatural.
No, that's a fallacy. Manuel, that's like saying we found a dead body and it can't be the maid, so it must be the butler. That's not how this works. You don't get to decide, hey, we don't have a natural explanation, therefore we get to make shit up.
No, but we don't make shit up.
Yes,
The
we do.
physical laws cannot explain
There's a
it.
way you
No, we do.
Okay, educate me. How did energy was created? Educate.
How many,
Yes.
Manuel, listen, how many different gods have men created over our history?
Billions upon billions.
Okay. If men have created billions of gods, then men can create gods as an explanation. How many of those billions of gods are real?
No. Nobody knows if billion are true, or nobody knows if one is true. Nobody knows.
Okay.
It might
But
be true that
you're calling no, Manuel, you're calling in to say the best evidence for God is the beginning of the universe, but you admit that we have no way of investigating the beginning of the universe. And now you're saying nobody can know. So are you saying you don't have evidence for God?
No. Give me 1 minute to explain myself.
I'll give you 30
What I'm
seconds.
trying to say is that the physical laws cannot explain a beginning because it's outside space, time, and matter. Therefore, the best inference for no physical laws can explain the world, the best inference is someone outside the universe.
How do you know it's someone outside the universe instead of something outside the universe?
I know, and I'll tell you how. Because if it
I'm going to mute you because that was just too funny.
Wow. I am so ready to hear this. I did not expect that, Matt.
So just for clarity, Manuel admits that science cannot explore the origin of the universe due to a physical limitation of the universe. We don't know if that limitation is permanent or not, because we don't know what else we may discover about the universe. So we could develop something down the line, an extension of quantum mechanics or whatever, that might be able to explore beyond the Planck time to determine the universe. But Manuel looks at the universe and sees, hey, physics doesn't currently have a natural explanation. Therefore, physics will never have a natural explanation, which is fallacy number one. And because physics will never have an explanation, therefore we're justified in proposing a supernatural explanation, fallacy number two. And when we have potentially multiple competing supernatural explanations, some one, some thing, some other one, some other thing, he then asserts that he knows which of these possible supernatural things did it. So we've now stacked two fallacies. Let's see if we stack a third one. How do you know what the supernatural origin is, Manuel?
An eternal recycled world cannot come to existence because you need an agent to say, okay, this is nothing. Now let's change it into something. Thunder doesn't light striking. It does it naturally. It doesn't say, I want to strike Matt. I want to strike Oscar. It does it naturally. So you need a force that has a will to say, I want to start it now. That's it.
Manuel, do you realize you just made another claim? You didn't actually answer the question. You just said, you know what, I'm gonna throw something else out there.
No, he said, how do I know that there can be an eternal world? Well, there can be an eternal world.
No, Manuel. And I appreciate the fact that there may be a slight language barrier here. The words eternal world never fucking left my mouth until this moment. So that's not the question that I asked. After you started with science doesn't currently have an explanation, you committed a fallacy to get to it won't have an explanation. And then you committed another fallacy to get to therefore it's reasonable to presume infer a supernatural explanation. That's another fallacy. And then when I asked you how you knew that it was a sum one rather than a sum thing, you spewed forth something that doesn't demonstrate that. So we're going to try one more time. Let's just say that just for a moment, Darante and I are convinced by your two fallacies. And we have now agreed with you. The origin of the universe is supernatural. We're now asking you, how can we know that it's a sum one rather than a sum thing?
There must be a necessary uncaused cause. There's no cause without.
Manuel, we're going to agree with you, just for the sake of argument, that there must be an uncaused cause. How can we know that this uncaused cause is a sum one and not a sum thing?
Yep.
Because it has a will.
No, Manuel, you have not demonstrated that it has a will. You just pulled that out of your asshole right now.
No, I didn't. You told me the reason.
I'm asking you how we can know it's a sum one rather than a sum thing, and you have asserted that we can tell that because it has a will. So I'm going to ask you the follow-up, which is, how can we tell that it has a will?
Natural thunder does not have will, so it cannot.
I agree with you that thunder does not have will. That is not even in the realm of a reasonable response to what I asked you. Please pay attention to what I asked you. Darante and I, for the sake of argument, are going to agree that there's a supernatural cause for the universe. You are asserting that it is a someone, a thinking agent. When we ask you how you know that, you say, because it has will. So now we're asking, how do you know it has will? And your response was, because because lightning doesn't have will. Okay. This rag doesn't have will either, but that doesn't demonstrate whether or not the cause of the house fire was a willful agent or faulty wiring. Pointing to something else that doesn't have will doesn't prove that your thing has will. So for the last fucking time, how can we know that your cause actually has will? Let's try it again.
An electrical house may be caused by fire, by thunder.
Manuel, I'm sorry that analogies are too much for you to fucking bear. But here's my question.
Oi.
How do you know that the cause of the universe had a will? That's it. That's the whole question.
Give me a second to explain.
I'm going to mute you.
Oh my goodness.
Here's the question. I'm going to say it 3 times. How do you know that the cause of the universe had a will? How do you know that the cause of the universe had a will? How do you know that the cause of the universe had a will? Begin.
How do I know that the world had a will? Because only agents have will, and God has will, and nature doesn't have will. How can the universe say the Big Bang is going to start 16 billion years ago because the universe wants to? It can't. It doesn't have a will.
Oh my
Okay.
goodness.
Thanks, Manuel. Thanks for that circular argument. You said, how can I tell that it has a will? Because only agents have will. Well, agent is the thing that you're trying to prove, and you used will to try to prove that it was an agent, and then you used agent to prove it was will. So that's one circular reasoning. The next words out of your mouth were, after, because only agents have will, you said, and God has will. Well, God is the thing that you're trying to prove. So you've done an equivocation fallacy between agent and God, and asserted that that has will as well. We're going to move on now.
It's got electrolytes.
Thank you for your time,
Hilarious.
Manuel.
Okay.
I would highly recommend you start looking into
nice
logical
talking to you,
fallacy.
Matt.
It wasn't nice talking to me.
No.
Don't lie. That couldn't have been fun.
No.
Oh
my
man,
goodness.
I was just looking at the fact that we seem to only have non-theist callers left.
Oh man.
And I'm looking at the callers and like, all right, fuck it. Let's see what happens. Joe in Illinois is an atheist, pronoun he, him, who says he thinks there's a potential argument to be made against abortion. Hey, Joe, is this an argument against legal abortion or moral abortion?
Hi, Matt. First of all, I just want to say big fan of the show and big fan of you guys. So I guess it's more of like, a moral quandary that I have.
I don't give a shit.
I was right. Okay. So I guess mine is more against, the argument against the consent argument. And I want to be clear too that, like, first of all, like, I'm 100% against or for abortion with in terms of rape, incest, all the crazy cases that people try and make the forefront of the argument. And I would also say that there is a piece of my argument that I recognize is an assumption. So
Joe,
I guess quick background.
Joe,
Sorry, go ahead.
Joe,
Yep.
Do you think abortion should be legally permissible or illegal?
I think it should be legal, and I don't think it's
That's
my.
all I give a fuck about. That's
Yep.
all I give a fuck about. I don't care if you think that, oh, it's immoral under these circumstances. I genuinely do not give the slightest fuck. I only care about whether or not it's legal.
Sure. And I definitely think from a policy standpoint, I guess my question is trying to help me sort of work through the quandary I have in my head around the consent argument.
The consent argument is not an argument with respect to abortion. Bodily autonomy is a fundamental right we bestow on people, and we violate it only with good cause.
Sure. And I guess, and as an extension of that, right, what I hear oftentimes is that we didn't consent to giving up our body, or I guess I shouldn't say our body. The woman did not consent to giving up her body.
Consent to sex is not consent to becoming pregnant. Consent to becoming pregnant is not consent to remaining pregnant. And consent to remain pregnant can be revoked.
Right. And I guess that's where I have the sort of the conundrum, because I think that obviously when you have consensual sex, which I've already precluded all of the non-consensual type situations, but when you're having consensual sex, there is, an agreement, so to speak, right? That even if you're using condoms, birth control, whatever, none of those things are guaranteed, nor do they claim to be perfect. So my question is, when you go into that, maybe a crazy analogy, but you go to bungee jump and you decide that you're going to do this, you're taking on the risk, right, for the
Yes.
fun, right? And you're
Joe,
hoping.
you didn't listen. Consent to sex is not consent to becoming pregnant. It is consenting to the known risk of becoming pregnant. Consenting to become pregnant is not consent to remain pregnant. And consent to remain pregnant can be revoked. What is it that is the problem here? Because you're suggesting that if you consent to sex, you're consenting to remaining pregnant if it happens. And that's simply not true.
Right, and that I guess part of that would lead to the assumption I am making as part of my argument, which is the when does life start kind of argument, and I genuinely don't have
I don't give a shit. It doesn't fucking matter. I don't care if it's in there doing calculus that will save the world. It doesn't have the right to use someone else's body without their consent. What right do you have to force someone to remain pregnant when they don't wish to be?
And I guess
really
what I would, yeah, and that's a great question. That's sort of where, as an atheist and someone who supports the legality of this, that's where I sort of this sort of started a few years back. I went to the Vegas body exhibit and seeing that.
I don't care. I don't care.
But
answer the question. What right do you have to force someone to remain pregnant against their will?
So I guess this would come back to the argument then of the life argument, because if the baby is born,
it doesn't fucking matter, Joe. It doesn't fucking matter. What right do you have to force someone to remain pregnant against their fucking will?
Yeah.
Well, I would argue that they went through the choices that led to them becoming pregnant and therefore consented to the possibility that could be the outcome.
No.
Wow.
Consent to sex is not consent to pregnancy. Consent to becoming pregnant doesn't mean you can remain pregnant. One of the things that you do when you're fucking is if you engage with sex with someone who can become pregnant, or if you are someone who can become pregnant, one of the things is you're saying, hey, what could potentially happen? Oh, I don't know. I could get an STD. Does that mean if somebody consents to having sex, they're consenting to having an STD and never fucking treating it to stop it? No, of course not. Meanwhile, they can consent to sex, shut up, knowing there's a risk to pregnancy, and doing so with the knowledge that they can then terminate that pregnancy.
And again, I guess this is where it comes back to the argument of when does life begin, sort of thing.
It doesn't fucking matter when life begins.
It doesn't matter.
Does your 5-year-old have the right to use your body without your fucking consent? The answer is no. I'll save you the time. So if a 5-year-old doesn't have the right to use your body without your consent, why do you want to give special rights to a fucking fetus?
Well, I guess that's where I'm like stuck with this quandary, right? Because
it's not a quandary. It's not a quandary. You have some bullshit fucking baggage and you won't listen to reason.
But see, Joe, what you don't realize, it's not even that you're giving, Joe, just give me a minute. You're not even giving the fetus special privileges. You're giving yourself special privileges over somebody else's life. Because I don't get this, they shouldn't be able to do it. Who the fuck are you, bruh? No, it's not your life. If it's your body, you make the decision to carry whatever you to do. But for somebody else to do something and for you to be like, well, this is a moral quandary for me, motherfucker, it's not your life. It's not your body. It's that simple. People make the decision to jump out of fucking planes. You're not out there boycotting them. People make the decision to go canoeing in places where there are fucking alligators at. Get the fuck off your high horse. It's somebody else's body, not yours. It shouldn't even be an issue for you. Sorry. But no, I do mean that shit because that shit bothers the fuck out of me. Oh, it matters when life begins. It's not your fucking life. You have nothing to do with that fucking life. Stay out of that conversation. It's real easy. Shit shouldn't bother you that has nothing to do with you. Sorry.
And again, I don't disagree with what you're saying. I'm simply coming from the lens of, you're right. Somebody jumps out of an airplane. As a consenting adult, they're taking the risk that chute doesn't open and they die. And that's a risk that they're taking with their own life. But if we if we
What if they
argue
don't
the,
die? Do they have the right to go get fixed? What if they don't die? Do they have the right to go seek medical help?
sure, absolutely.
So shouldn't a woman who gets pregnant have the right to terminate the pregnancy by the exact same fucking logic?
But that's where my moral quandary comes in, with it being that now you've introduced another
But it shouldn't
life.
even be your moral quandary because it's not your body.
I already settled this issue with
Sure.
another life. Does your 5-year-old have the right to use your body without consent?
No, and I think that
No,
I mean, I guess
it's a one-word fucking answer. No, and it destroys your fucking quandary instantaneously. Because your objection is, ooh, there's another life involved, and I already solved that by asking whether or not your 5-year-old has the right to use your body without your consent, which you've already acknowledged is no. And then the follow-up question is, then why are you trying to grant special rights to a fucking fetus? And your answer is what?
that the 5-year-old, I don't know a scenario where the 5-year-old would require me in order to be a part of my body or my bodily autonomy in order to sustain life. But obviously the fetus would.
So what? That doesn't mean that it gets special rights.
Well, I guess, and again, that's where for me, as someone who, again, I fully, it's not my right to tell anyone what to do with their body. I'm just saying from my own moral compass, my own morality.
I don't give a shit about your
to-
moral compass. You're not fucking listening to reason. So I don't care what your moral quandary is. Stay the fuck out of other people's business and stop being a fucking busybody Karen.
Yeah. Your moral compass is for you, not other people.
Sure, but I think we all I guess if we want to talk about politics, we vote based on our opinion and belief system.
We shouldn't
and
be
what we
voting on
believe.
that. We shouldn't be voting
again,
on that.
I always support all legislation that I don't like the Roe v. Wade overturn because it's not
Joe,
it's more of like,
you waited on fucking phone for 1 hour and 45 minutes because you have a moral quandary that does not fucking matter, isn't fucking relevant, and isn't tied to anything real. And then when I explain to you all of the details, what you keep doing is saying, oh, I agree with that. I agree with that. And I don't want to make it illegal. I just really, really, really seem to have concerns because what if somebody gets pregnant and then they find out they kill somebody, they killed a baby. I'm not comfortable with that. Then don't have a fucking abortion, which I don't think is going to be a problem for you, but stay out of everybody else's business, which seems to be your biggest
You're
problem.
marked safe. Yep. Joe, you've been marked safe from this concern. You should be okay, bro. You should be okay. You've been marked safe from this being an issue for you. Revel in that and leave other people alone.
Oh man, I don't even want to talk about that at all, but okay.
Boy.
Let's try.
Y'all, if we have any more theists out there, we'd love for you to call in. We'd love to leave the lines open for at least 3 more theists. Let's get in here. Let's have some good conversation.
Let's try this. Jose's gone from Chile. Says he was able to convince ChatGPT that Jesus is God. Hey, Jose.
Oh.
Are you there? You may have to tap your phone to wake up the web client and then tap the browser.
I don't like them putting chemicals.
Okay.
Yep.
So despite the fact that I called this, hello web client, Jose, I'm going to leave you on hold while I write down your IP address. Thanks so much. Let's assume for a second that Jose had been serious and not just, oh, let me play whatever loud fucking sound that was. Let me get that down so that I can turn it over to anonymous and send them after you.
Get
There we go. Yep. Expect a call from anonymous soon, Jose. I'm going to leave you on hold because that's not your name anyway. But let's imagine for a second that someone had been able to convince ChatGPT that Jesus is God. What would that do? Like, I knew when I saw this that this wasn't going to be a serious call. Because first of all, ChatGPT is predictive text and it will cave. The second you ask it a question and it gives you an answer and you say, no, that's not right, it's something else, ChatGPT will say, oh, I'm sorry, maybe this, and it will try to respin stuff. But ChatGPT is predictive text, which is based on whatever it's trained on. If the overwhelming majority of people are convinced that a God exists, then I find it incredibly unremarkable that a large language model making predictions based on what so many different confused people say would be easy to convince that Jesus is God. But also, I'd be willing to bet that I could convince ChatGPT that Jesus is not God. Moreover, I don't think it'd be that difficult to get ChatGPT to acknowledge that, as far as we can tell, not a single person who lives right now could possibly have sufficient warrant, based on what we know, to conclude that Jesus was God.
Yep.
Would that disprove God? No, it wouldn't. It wouldn't tell you anything about God. It wouldn't tell you anything about ChatGPT. That's not how any of this works. So say goodbye, Jose. Just say it on somebody else's show.
Yikes.
All right. Mark's calling from South Carolina. Pronouns are him. This is a different one because Mark wants to prove that near-death experiences are real and not hallucinations. Hey, Mark, how you doing?
All right. Good.
How
yes,
do we
I have
go
a new
about
slant on this.
proving?
Well, here's something that I came across. That is, people who are blind from birth having NDEs. And they're just like other people's NDEs. And the interesting thing is, so there cannot be hallucinations because people who are blind from birth do not have any visual material to hallucinate from. The dreams of people who are blind from birth have no images. They have no shapes in them.
You're actually wrong.
Yeah.
Blind people can experience visual hallucinations. This is already documented. You didn't even bother to Google. You just came up with a way where you think you can prove NDEs aren't hallucinations by asserting that a particular group of people who've had them cannot experience hallucinations when you are wrong. Blind people can and do.
I'd like to know how.
Well, then maybe instead of calling into an atheist show, pretending you can prove shit you can't without spending a half a second Googling, you could go out and Google, can blind people experience hallucinations, and then follow the evidence to the various scientific journals and go read those studies. And then maybe instead of looking for a way to prove something you believe by citing facts that you don't understand and aren't true, you could instead follow the evidence where it actually leads instead of trying to massage the evidence where you'd like it to go.
Well, here, I didn't just make this up. I was relying on information from Grayson, from Burke, Farnia, Jeffrey Long, various people who are specialists in NDEs. And that was their consensus. That was their view.
Are they specialists in blind people?
Well, they have, well, yes.
Well,
obviously
not, because...
See, I don't know how you can have someone who's an expert in something that hasn't been demonstrated to be real.
Oh, man.
Explain.
Well, near-death experiences.
Explain.
I am explaining. Near-death experience is the label that we put on something that people report as an experience they had. But the narrator is a flawed narrator. It is a brain deprived of oxygen in a weird state and all this other stuff. And you have no way of demonstrating whether they actually experienced that or if this is a story their brain made up to explain missing time or one of several other candidate explanations. So there can be people who are experts in studying NDE claims, but nobody can be an expert on near-death experiences because we don't have a way to get in to determine what individuals actually did or didn't experience versus what they report and describe experiencing. But what we can do, since we deal with self-report stuff, is we can go say, hey, here's a bunch of people who are blind from birth. Can they have visual hallucinations? And it turns out the science shows that they can, in much the same way that some people have an internal monologue and some don't. And some people are really good at closing their eyes and visualizing an apple hanging in the air in front of them. And some people aren't any good at that. Some people, when they close their eyes, it's just as if they had their eyes open and were blind. So this gross oversimplification about the human experience is not only not true, but it wouldn't prove that NDEs are true. You need to look up how one could go about testing and falsifying near-death experience claims, because your attempts so far have been something that I can debunk in 5 seconds with a Google search. So
Well, let me
try
ask
harder
you
next
about
time.
this
Great.
apple.
No,
No, bro.
Okay,
No,
how could they even
like
how could they even understand what red is if they've never
You
seen
need to
red?
go
you
learn,
don't
Mike.
understand it.
Instead of sitting here continuing to parade your own fucking ignorance, how could they even do this?
Yes.
And you could go look this shit up, but you don't, because you enjoy your ignorance, because it fosters your delusions. Don't call me back
Yep.
with
Well, that's a
bullshit.
little harsh.
No,
I mean,
it's
it's
a little true.
Oh man.
All right. We got a couple more calls here. Pranav is calling from India. Pronouns are him. The Eastern faith have a different view on God than the Abrahamic religions. Yes, we know that. What's going on, Pranav?
Yep.
Wonderful. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes. How are you?
Sure.
Wonderful. I'm doing fine. Thank you for accepting my call. I honestly didn't think that this would happen. But okay. So I just wanted to come across a couple of things. The Eastern faith, the way they look at God is completely different when you look at the way the Abrahamic religions look at God. I
Yes,
could explain
there's a
that
bunch of
to
different
you.
categories.
Yeah.
Oh, fair enough. Yes. Okay. Yes. Yes. But in that, what I'm trying to say is that God here. So, for example, okay, let me tell you this. So, I am Hindu by birth, and there is a place for atheists within Hinduism, but it can't be a religion if you can also have atheists that are accepted, right? Now, whether that is
No, that's not
the
true.
case.
So
correct.
first of all, I don't accept that someone
No.
is hang on. I don't accept that someone is Hindu
Sure.
by birth.
Go on.
I don't accept that someone is Hindu by birth. I believe that you can be born into a family of Hindus, but Hinduism being a set
Okay.
of beliefs, you have to become convinced or taught in some way. That said, there are
Okay.
plenty of religions that would allow someone to be an atheist. For example, there are secular atheist Jews that are still
Mhm.
practicing
Mhm.
members of a temple. It
Yep.
is just wrong to say that there aren't religions. And I'm already aware
But
of plenty
can I
of
ask you a question
and
here, sir?
well, you could let me finish my answer. I'm already aware of plenty of
Okay. Sure.
other Hindus who are atheist, because
Yep.
there are models of Hinduism that don't require an express belief in a specific deity, but tend to view the Hindu narrative or
Mhm.
narratives as stories that
Mhm.
are humanity's best attempts to describe something. So you could do that for Christianity, and people have, including
People
Thomas
do.
Jefferson, by removing the miracles
Um,
from the Bible.
But okay, this is where I have a question, if I can politely butt in here. But do the Abrahamic religions not have a clause, can we call it, to say that there is no, it's not, there's no gray area there, right? It's black and white, in the sense that
No.
you believe in a God or you do not. You believe in the holy, whatever they call it.
So it's
Whereas
not about the
in
it's not
here
about
with
the
the
religion.
Eastern,
It's not about the religion. It's simply true. You are
no,
everyone on
I'm
the
talking
planet.
about the scriptures.
Listen.
I'm talking about the book.
Listen. Everyone is either convinced that a God exists or they are not. Those are the only options. Some of the people who are convinced that a God exists may be a part of a particular religion, and some religions have more strict models than others. But some people who don't believe and are not convinced that a God exists could be a part of various versions of those. There's 1,000 different denominations that are all identify as Christian, and they all disagree on some point of doctrine,
Hmm.
including whether or not someone must in fact believe in a God, because there is a view of a
Okay.
particular version of Christianity that says, I'm a
Okay.
Christian if I emulate the character
Hmm.
of Jesus in the Bible, whether I believe there's a God or not.
Uh-huh.
So how narrow
Hmm.
a particular religion is defined by that religion, but there is no governing authority for Christianity. That's a broad category. You're probably not a
Absolutely.
Southern Baptist if you don't
But
believe in God.
okay.
You're probably
Okay.
not a
Wouldn't you
Pentecostal if you don't
consider
believe in.
the
Never mind.
scriptures to be a governing authority in that sense for a Christian? Like the Christian has to go by the scriptures, right? In some sense.
I
For
was going to answer
example,
that if you hadn't interrupted, but now
Islam
I'm
does
done.
not.
Pranav, I think the
Okay.
mistake you're
So
making is you open this conversation up with an oversimplification, and that's where you're trying to keep the conversation stuck at. And Matt is trying his best to walk you through how your extreme oversimplification of this is overlooking several nuances that makes your claims not only wrong but irrelevant. And so what you're trying to say is, no, well, Christianity is defined by the Bible. That is not how Christianity is defined. No religion is defined by what
okay,
a
one
person
second. I
outside.
need to stop you there. I need to stop you
Pranav,
there. I need to
Pranav,
stop you there. I
Pranav,
asked you a
bruh,
mere question.
you are not going to
Based on
stop
the
me there,
question, you have
Pranav,
postulated a couple of
dude.
other.
I am, bruh.
I've
Pranav,
muted him
thank you.
since he doesn't know how to
Thank
fucking
you.
have a conversation.
Like, yikes, bruh. Okay, so the problem is, and the thing that we're just trying to make clear is that you've already demonstrated that you don't have a real understanding of Christianity. And that's what Matt was getting ready to really hit at. There are actually Christian groups who do allow atheists to participate, a part of them. There are several progressive Christian groups out there. I wouldn't be one of them, but they exist. So that's not that to open this up by saying Eastern religions are different than Abrahamic religions. You're overlooking that 2/3 of Abrahamic religions are Eastern religions. Even within the Christianity aspect, there's the Coptic Christians and the Eastern Orthodox Christians. And so it's just like, it's this oversimplification. And I'm going to be very honest with you, Pranav, is giving off Eastern supremacy to me. It's just like trying to say that, hey, religion on the East side is better than all the other religions, even though I don't know a damn thing about none of the other religions. And quite frankly, Pranav, I'm not interested in that type of conversation. Religion allowing atheists is not necessarily a badge of honor for me, nor is it any evidence or proof that this religion is true. You know? Now we can see
No,
what you got to
nobody's
say.
making.
Were you
Yeah.
talking the whole
Okay.
time, dude?
So I was not. Can you hear? I'm sorry. I'm calling from a very far distance. I'm not sure if you're overlapping now. Can you hear me properly now?
Yeah, it's
Mhm.
amazing what technology can do.
Yeah, I know. Tell me about that. But okay. So my point is not to bring upon a Eastern supremacy or any of that sort. I would be considered an outcast for my beliefs within my own community, if you could say that. But see, my point is that the whole concept of God is completely different when it comes to the Abrahamic religions when compared to the Eastern faith.
So what?
Yikes.
So it makes a difference in that there is not a person, there is not a supernatural being. So for example, the Mahabharata or the Ramayana, they're all
Jesus
myths.
fucking Christ.
They are stories.
I don't
Very
need you
obvious.
to
The Bible.
I don't need you to call in and give a fucking book report about shit we already know.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
called in to
sorry.
tell us there's a difference. Stop talking. I'm going to mute you. It saves me time. I've spent my life studying religions, or at least the bulk of my life studying religions. I'm aware that there are differences between the Abrahamic faiths, which all tie back to Abraham, and non-Abrahamic faiths, which aren't, by the way, all Eastern faiths. I'm aware that there are a number of different God concepts across the entire spectrum of religions. There are deistic gods, and there's debates about how non-interventionist they may or may not be. There are theistic notions of God. And then among that, there are polytheistic gods, monotheistic gods, henotheistic gods, all of these and several others. If you're calling in to just say, hey, not everybody has a belief like an Abrahamic God, I fucking knew that. long before I was ever hosting a show. I knew that even before I took my comparative religions course my freshman year of high school. I knew that when I was 5, riding the bus to church, singing songs, and they explained that not everybody believes in God or Jesus, that there are people out there who believe in a pantheon of gods. There's the ancient Roman gods, the Greek gods, then there's Ganesh and Shiva. And then there are religions that sometimes deny their religions that are
Mhm.
things like versions of Buddhism that don't have any deistic belief. That's you've got Buddhism and Hinduism tied together and all this other stuff. I'm going to ask you this as quickly and easily as I can, Pranav. Are you ready? I have a question.
Go on, sir.
What is your fucking point?
My point is that there is a very different rendition to the meaning of this word, which I don't think can be equated along the same lines. Maybe there are. See, I'm not very particular about religion, and okay. So just to touch upon something you said, the Ganesh and the Shiva, they are not really gods. That if you know anything about Hinduism, you should know that they are not actually gods. But that aside,
Neither are the
you must
Orisha or
realize
the
that there are.
pantheon of the ancient Egyptians or the pantheon of ancient Greece for that matter. None of them are really gods. They're all
What
concepts,
Yeah,
is
sorry, sir. I was
principles, and
trying to make a point
ideologies.
here.
point? What is your point?
Yes, that they are not to be equated along the same lines, and that if there are
Pranav,
things that help.
Pranav,
Ah,
did I equate
be
them?
serious, man. Come on.
Yes, I'm fucking serious, you shit. Did I equate them?
No, I'm not.
I'm gonna ask you this question. Did myself or Darante equate the Abrahamic God with the other gods? Yes or no?
No, sir. No, you did not. Absolutely.
Then
Did not.
why the fuck are you calling in to tell me shit I don't know and complain about stuff I never fucking did?
Because there is another perspective to.
No, Pranav. Are you aware that there's a left shoe for your left foot and a right shoe for your right foot in many
There is.
cases? And
Mhm.
there's a left glove for your left hand and a right glove for your right hand. If I called into your fucking show to lecture you about shit you already knew and how you shouldn't confuse the left glove with the right glove when you've never confused the left glove with the right glove and never suggested that people should confuse the left glove with the right glove, how would you feel about that call?
Yeah. Can I just say something here?
No, you can answer my fucking question, which was if I called in and did that to you, how would you feel about that fucking call?
Really? Okay. Not very well, I suppose. I'll agree with that.
Cool.
I'll agree with that. See, I wasn't
Say you're
particularly aware
sorry
that
and
this is.
say goodbye.
No, I'm not sorry, but
Then bye.
Oh man. Matt, with the glove, the only thing I could think about then I guess the left glove is created in the image of the right glove, and that's why left-handed people had to be persecuted against for so long.
That's right. Left-handed means sinister. All right. I'm going to stop talking entirely
Oh man.
because I need to shut up for this next call.
I'm afraid now.
Dante's calling from Denmark to talk to Darante.
Oh, snap. All right, Dante.
Dante
All right,
says,
you're on.
atheism is white mental colonization. You are a mental slave to the white devil under atheism. Dante, you're calling to the web browser, so you may have to tap your phone to wake it up and then tap it again to wake the browser up, but you're on the line with Darante.
All right. Okay, so atheism is talk to me, Dante. Tell me how you jumped to this conclusion. Are you there?
Dante, I see you're calling for the web client.
Do not.
You may have to. Okay, there you are.
Are you there,
Dante?
Dante?
Dante ran away.
Oh, well, look at there. Well, that's unfortunate.
Well,
That's
too bad.
funny one. I know.
Hopefully Dante
I
calls
was
back
interested in
because,
hearing that one.
yeah, I mean, we don't have any other theists, and we don't have anybody else
Man.
calling in to tell us shit we already know that we didn't get wrong, as if, hey, Darante, I don't know if you know this, but there are clouds in the sky, and they're made of water vapor. And when there's static buildup and a change in different electrical potentials, lightning comes down. But there are some people that think Zeus is throwing lightning bolts. Now, I know you're not one of them, but I really needed to call in to tell you that I learned something very important today. And I don't want you guys or anybody else out there confusing natural lightning with Thor or Odin lightning.
Oh my goodness. This is the world that we live in.
Hopefully we're getting calls in right now. So I think maybe Dante's calling back.
Yeah, I'm gonna leave the lines open until like 4:20. If we don't get a theist caller in by then, I'm just gonna close the lines and we'll end early. No spots for atheists though. Sorry guys, but we need some theists on the line who are not
I get it.
web caller trolls,
Although I am going to save the call screener a second and just randomly put one through while people are queuing up. So here we go. Here's someone. I only know your number. I don't know your name. You're actually live right now. We skipped the call-in queue. Who are you and what are you calling about?
I'm a theist. Calling about scientific facts and scripture, possibly.
About scientific what?
Scientific facts in a scripture. So, for example,
You're breaking up a little bit. I still don't know. Did you say scientific sex in the scripture?
Facts, yeah.
Oh, no, scientific facts in the scripture. Which scripture?
For the Quran, for example, it gets the Earth's age compared to the universe's age correct, like the ratio of the Earth's age to the universe's age.
You know that Hinduism comes closest to getting the age of the universe correct? Because the age of the universe is about 13.7 billion years, and Hinduism comes the closest with about 15 billion years. Does that tell us whether or not Hinduism is true?
I guess I'll have to look into that exact how they got that. I mean, it could be. Yeah, it could be. It could be true.
So if Hinduism could be true, then that means Islam could be false, right?
Well, it depends on the preservation of Hinduism scripture and when that.
No. You just said that Hinduism could be true, and if Hinduism is true,
that fact was revealed.
If Hinduism is true, then Islam is false, right?
If that fact was revealed in a modern revelation, then yeah, Islam would be false. If it was revealed
that's not what I asked. I don't know why it is that you Muslims, when you call in to pretend that there's good reason to believe in Islam, you fail to ever answer the question that's actually asked and instead go a step further. Here's a fact.
Yep.
Is it possible for Islam and Hinduism to both be true at the same time?
No, not in form,
no. Which means if Islam is true, Hinduism cannot be, and if Hinduism is true, Islam cannot be. Correct?
There's correct, but it depends on which branch of Hinduism.
There's no but. There's no but and no depends. It is a logical fact. No, stop. It is a logical fact. If two things cannot be true at the same time, then if one of them is true, the other one cannot be. Correct?
But Hinduism represents so many branches.
I'm asking you not about Hinduism. I'm saying if two things cannot be true at the same time, if they are by definition mutually exclusive, then if A is true, B has to be false, and if B is true, A has to be false, correct?
Yes, if they have different
Then why
interpretations,
didn't you
yes.
just say that at the beginning instead of doing what you Muslim apologists do every fucking time, which is try to tap dance around, avoid the obvious logical implications that are going to be a problem for you, and add a bunch of irrelevant shit? Why couldn't you just say yes when I fucking asked?
Because it's making a leap. Hinduism represents so
No,
many
there's
different
no
beliefs.
fucking leap.
It's
No,
not one
sir, there's
religion.
there's no fucking leap. Why can't you be honest? Why do you make it so that Darante and I have to mute you, explain things as if you're in first fucking grade, narrow
not
it
fun.
down to a true either or in order to get you to acknowledge that the question we asked first, you knew the right answer to and avoided giving? Why is it that we have to do all the fucking work instead of you who are calling in to defend a God?
I mean, it was just to clarify, but yeah, if you have any more questions.
No, it's not just to clarify. When I asked you the first time that, and I said, if Hinduism is true, then Islam cannot be true. You should have said yes then, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Then why didn't you?
I just to clarify the branches and stuff, you know. Hinduism is more
I don't
than
need any clarification
Hinduism.
about branches. We weren't discussing branches and I didn't ask you for clarification. So once again, why didn't you just answer with yes?
I guess it might arrive at a different conclusion, which might be inaccurate, is what I thought. But
So you acknowledge the logic that if two things are mutually exclusive, only one of the two of them can be true. But when asked to verify it against your own religion, your answer is it might have led to a wrong conclusion. And that's why you couldn't be truthful. How can the truth lead to a wrong conclusion?
Because each category represents a lot of different beliefs. It's not just one religion. You have to understand that.
No. It doesn't matter how many different versions of Islam or Hinduism. This was a propositional logic statement. If then, if Hinduism is true, then Islam is not. If these two are mutually exclusive, then only one of the two of them can be correct. That has nothing to do with. So, for example, is it possible for Shias and Sunnis to both be correct?
No, of course not.
So only one of the two of those is correct, right?
Yeah, you have to define what you mean by Hinduism and what you mean by Islam.
No, I don't. The
You have to
point
define
had
your terms
nothing to
before you
do.
compare.
The point had nothing. No, the point had nothing to do with Hinduism or Islam. The point was about getting to whether or not claims are mutually exclusive, because that's the question you
I agree.
avoided addressing. Because you called in to talk about what the Quran may or may not have to say about science. And I pointed out that other religions make claims and some of them are more accurate. And if your statement is, hey, is there an accurate claim here that's sufficient to reach some conclusion about God, then you need to explain why you haven't looked into the Hinduism claim and why you are dismissing it in favor of your preferred religion.
Yeah, I wouldn't dismiss Hinduism. I mean,
you did.
Yeah,
You're a Muslim.
Well, we'd have to go by the most modern revelation because that's the most preserved.
Well, no.
That's why I'd be Muslim.
Why would we have to go by the most modern revelation? What wouldn't God get it right the first time?
Well, in our beliefs, different villages or different nations have different laws that apply to their.
I'm not asking about nations or religions or laws. I asked you, wouldn't God get it right the first time?
Get what right?
The revelation.
Revelation.
Yeah, he got it right the first time, but it wasn't preserved.
Cool. So if God got it right the first time, then we don't need to have the newest proposed revelation. It was right the first time.
If the revelation was preserved, then yes, we wouldn't.
Cool. How do we tell whether or not the correct revelation has been preserved and whether or not it's more correct or less correct than a more modern one?
Ask a historian. I think
Historians
go with
do not make proclamations about revelations from God. The issue here, the issue here that you're trying to do is say, oh, it's about which one has been preserved. But that should be preserved with respect to the original revelation, not preserved with respect to the original report on the revelation. So, for example, if God revealed to you that it's okay to marry a 9-year-old and have sex, then that would either be true or not, independent of what the reporting on it is, correct?
Yeah.
Yep. So is it morally permissible to have sex with a 9-year-old?
I don't know where you found that from.
It's just a question. Is it morally permissible to have sex with a 9-year-old?
No, of course not. That's way too young.
Cool. At what age can you start having sex?
I guess the age of consent, which is when you're.
What's the word from God
physically.
on this? What's the word from God on this?
That's what we go with: mental and physical maturation, for whenever they're ready.
Okay. So when Muhammad married Aisha, was that okay?
I don't really subscribe to hadith, so that doesn't apply to me, honestly.
I didn't ask you if it applied to you. I'm asking you, when Muhammad married Aisha, was that morally permissible?
If she was 9, no.
Okay. So you're a Muslim who's saying that if Muhammad married and had sex with Aisha at 9, that is immoral.
That would have been sin on his part, yes.
Okay. So if that happened and God picked Muhammad as his representative, then God picked someone who was going to do something immoral that would harm a child, right?
Yeah, if that happened, then yeah, that would have harmed the child.
How do we tell whether or not Muhammad married and had sex with a 9-year-old?
I mean, you'd have to ask a historian on that, and not everyone agrees on the exact age of her. So.
Yeah. But God's making revelations, right?
Yeah.
Why hasn't God revealed to us whether or not Muhammad was immoral, whether or not the reports about him having sex with a 9-year-old actually happened, and what his actual position is on this?
I mean, it's all fabricated nonsense. There's no actual reliable historical evidence that she was 9 at all. So
No. I'm saying that wasn't the question. Once again, the question was, why hasn't God cleared this up?
I mean, just I don't know. It's just men fabricating stuff. I don't know. I mean,
No, you cannot claim that it's men fabricating stuff. But if I were God and men were I'm still talking. If I were God and men were making up stories about me or my prophet that weren't true, I feel that I would have a moral obligation to correct that information. Wouldn't you?
I suppose. I mean.
Yeah.
Yikes, man.
So, no, thanks. That's fine. I have the same problem, by the way, with Christianity. My problem with Christianity is this notion that there are a bunch of different denominations out there who all think they're right, and they're making moral proclamations, and they're instantiating those moral proclamations in law and imposing them on people who don't even follow their religion. For example, do you think it is a sin to draw Muhammad?
Within my religion, I mean, not looking in a negative way, sure, but not looking normal way.
Well,
that's not what it says.
Generally within Islam, you're not supposed to represent any figures, which is why the designs are kind of abstract. But if I draw Muhammad, is that a sin?
If it's not really, no.
Okay. So cool. You are now in conflict with the Muslims I've debated in the past, generally speaking, and that's fine. just like there are plenty of Christians who aren't Southern Baptists, or plenty of Christians who aren't, Catholics. We're just trying to get to your basics on this. So why is it that if you think God reveals stuff, and I shouldn't say primary because this is just where you started, but you suggested that the Quran reveals things about science. Does it count as a revelation if we only find out that the Quran is correct after we make a scientific discovery and someone goes and reads the Quran and massages a piece of text to fit the discovery? Because I don't feel like we learned anything about science from the Quran.
That's good. That's a good point.
Yeah, it can be vague. So, like the Quran, for example, says the Earth age 2/6 the age of the universe, which is, it said that before NASA discovered that fact.
Yeah, but so the point is, the Quran could say that the Earth is 2/6 the age of the universe, which, by the way, thank you for saying that. How long is it going to be the case that the age of the Earth is 2/6 of the age of the universe? Because when the Earth first formed, it was not 2/6 the age of the universe.
That's right.
And around now, it might be approximately, but in 20 billion years, it will not be 2/6 of the age of the universe. So you're suggesting that the all-knowing, all-powerful creator of the universe gave you a fractional age relating the Earth to the universe that only applies in this narrow window and only vaguely and non-specifically, and that this is revelation, that this is the creator of the universe? That's like saying, hey, I'm half as old as my dad when I was 30. I'm not half as old as my dad anymore. And I definitely wasn't half as old as my dad when I was a toddler. So you're using a relative comparison that is dynamic and shifting to try to prove that God revealed something. And by the way,
Oh, that's good.
we didn't discover the age of the universe or the age of the earth from the Quran. So it wasn't particularly helpful. And in a while, it won't be helpful at all. How is that proof of God?
I mean, so yeah, the Quran is meant for the rest of mankind. So from the time of Muhammad until the end, I guess, the day of judgment, which is, expected not to be too long after that revelation, maybe within 1,000 years, 2,000 years. I mean, that's still going to be 2/6 the age of the universe. That's the audience that it's supposed to be meant for, not like for aliens 13 billion years from now. So, I mean, the Quran also claims to correct the Bible too, so maybe correct Genesis in terms of that.
I can correct the Bible. I don't need a God to correct the Bible. Bats aren't birds. Bats aren't birds. The earth wasn't created in 6 days. The order of events in Genesis are factually wrong from science. I don't need a God to point that out.
Behold, Matt is the Holy One.
Yeah, but
the anointed
wouldn't
one.
know that.
The prophet returned and fulfilled.
You wouldn't have known that in the 7th century, though. I don't think anyone would have known that.
They didn't know it in the 7th century, and the book didn't know it in the 7th century. There's no demonstration that anybody knew any of the things you're reading into the text. There's no demonstration that anything in there is a revelation coming from knowledge beyond the people of their time. But instead, we find out scientific discoveries, and you people who want to make it look like God knew this all along, or our holy book is more magical and special, start reading into it until you find a passage that you can interpret as loosely consistent with the facts of reality. But none of that answers my question that I asked you, which is, how does this demonstrate that a God revealed this information?
I mean, it has to be beyond human capacity. No, I mean,
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. There's a statement in a book that at a later time can be interpreted as a loose description of DNA. How do you know whether the author knew what it was? How do you know whether it was revealed to the author? How do you know that it was revealed to the author by someone who knew what the answer is? How did you rule out coincidence? How did you rule out interpretation? How did you rule out seeing what you want to see? You don't just get to say it had to come from someone other than humans, because you know what? Humans have speculated about all kinds of things. And when we don't have scientific understanding of the world, we might infer things that could be loosely correct because there's a limited pool. See, we're similar creatures who think in similar ways, trying to solve similar problems. And so when you look up into the sky and you see the sun by day and the stars by night, there's a number. You see the sun going across the sky. There's only a couple of different models that could be correct with that, which is that the sun is going around us or we are spinning. It's very unlikely that people would suspect we were spinning, and yet things like that were proposed, which is how we came to say, let's investigate this and see if this bears fruit. So when Einstein, before he demonstrated that E equals mc squared, he had some sort of suspicion that E might equal something close to mc squared. How do you know that God didn't reveal that to Einstein?
I mean, it's just, well, I guess he's been working on similar equations before, so he's just adding on to previous known knowledge
That's not what I asked.
after.
That's not what I asked. I asked, how do you know that God didn't reveal that to Einstein?
I mean, I guess that would mean scientists are all prophets too, by that logic.
So you're not going to answer my question. That's not surprising. So let's try a different question. If Einstein had said God revealed to him E equals mc squared, would that be sufficient to conclude that God revealed something to Einstein?
No.
No, and yet that is infinitely more specific and useful than anything in any holy book in the history of the fucking world. E equals mc squared is a fucking formula. And if Einstein claimed that God revealed it to him, then we'd all be Einsteinians, given your reasoning for suggesting that some fucking vague passage in the Quran is actually dictated on high, even though it does no use for us until we actually investigate it. See, scientific revelations still have to be tested. Einstein could have said, you know what, E equals mc squared, and then we go out and we do the testing to prove it. We could come up with a model of general relativity. God could have showed up and said, oh, no, you've got some things wrong. Relativity is the thing. And boom, that sends us down a path of discovery. And it would have started with a revelation. But if instead we discover this on our own, and then somebody says, ooh, in my holy book, I think the word relative or relativity or something like that is in there, or that not all things are concrete, or whatever kind of vague, post hoc rationalization you can make an interpretation. If that wouldn't confirm that it was revealed to God, it's silly for you to suggest that the earth being temporarily in the ballpark of 2/6 the age of the universe is proof that God revealed something. You got to do better.
Yeah, I mean, he had no. Okay. I mean, what are the odds? He gets it by 1%.
What are the odds?
Oh man.
33%.
Let me tell you what the odds are.
Ratio.
The odds are virtually 100% that you would ask, what are the odds? Because what are the odds is what someone says when they're making an argument from incredulity fallacy.
Yep.
You see, you look at this thing as if, oh, how could this information have been here if not for God? And the answer is, I don't know, and neither do you, because God doesn't even get to be a candidate explanation until you can demonstrate that it is. And what are the odds is the battle cry of every ignorant apologist out there who wants to conclude that because we don't have an answer and we don't have a way to show that this happened naturally, therefore it must have happened supernaturally. It is a fallacy every single time. Thanks for failing to defend Islam.
Yep.
On that note, man, we're out of callers. We ran the gamut. We did all the stuff. Hey, there's a bunch of shows here. There's a bunch of shows here on the Line Network. Tonight, hey, producer lady.
Yes.
Who's on the show tonight? Is it Jimmy and John?
Jimmy and John Gleason. Tomorrow night should be Erica Gets a Gibbon with Aaron Adair.
man.
I think it's going to be myself and Alyssa again on Tuesday. Then Andrew Seidel, it will be with Matt on Wednesday. And then it's going to be Luxander and Ben on Thursday.
Ooh.
How soon do Darante and I get to do a show together again? Is that even like on the list?
That is not on the list. I think that will...
Fuck.
Yourself just breaking my heart.
I
Just
can't see that
breaking my
far into
heart.
the future.
I would fire you if it wouldn't cause us all to go broke. And if it wasn't for the fact that I don't get to fire you. Yeah. I'm looking forward to the next time Darante and I get to do a show. Don't care what show it is. Anytime, any place. What are you going on this week?
Oh man, I'll be dropping some new content this week. I am currently on sabbatical from live shows on my channel for a little bit, even though I kind of broke routine this week to talk about sinners because everybody's been talking about it. And did a video, we did a live today with Dr. Bird talking about biblical marriage and how, it's basically a bunch of bullshit that's damaging people. So that's pretty like the highlight of my channel right now. Other than that, man, I'm constantly dropping new content. I am spending a little bit more time on the back end, trying to build out some secular ministry frameworks and really wrestle with what that could mean and how to navigate all the landmines that come with it.
That's awesome. So let me tell you, first of all, a huge thank you to you for being here with me, putting up with my shit, and having a fun show. And thanks everybody for calling in and for supporting this. You can go to linemerch.com to support the network. You can also go to patreon.com/colorline. And if you look around on this channel, you will find the 9-hour plus live stream that we did to raise money for recovering from religion. It's currently sitting at $96,000. If you get it to $100,000, we're going to get a whole new logo and a bunch of other stuff. It's the reason I don't have any skin on my face. In the meantime, I haven't watched your content on Sinners because I barely know what it is and haven't seen it, so I don't want spoilery stuff. But everybody keeps talking about it, so it's coming.
Yes.
I'm going to be out the other shows. Thank you, everybody.
Awesome.
Call the line.
Have a great one.